The guards dragged Darien down corridors that seemed to swallow light itself. Stone walls wept with moisture, and the torches burned with flames the color of old blood. His shoulders screamed wear. Their gauntlet hands gripped him, but he'd stopped struggling an hour ago. Struggling only made them tighten there. Hold only made them laugh. "You're going to love your new quarters, rebel." One of them sneered, his breath reeking of sour wine. "We've prepared something special." Darien said nothing. Words were wasted on men who served the vampire courts without question, who brought children to feasts and called it duty. He tried to save 3 families from their village raid. He'd failed. Now he would pay the price that all enemies of the Crimson Throne eventually paid. Death. But apparently his death wouldn't be quick. They stopped before an iron door scarred with claw marks. Deep gouges as if something with inhuman strength had tried desperately to escape. The guards exchanged glances. And for the first time, Darien saw something other than cruelty in their expressions. Fear. "Last chance to beg," the first guard said. "Mike convinced the lords to give you a clean execution instead." Darien met his eyes. "I stopped begging the day I learned what you people are." The guard's face hardened. He nodded to his companion, and together they threw open the door and shoved Darien through with enough force to send him sprawling onto cold stone. He hit hard, tasted blood, heard the door boom shut behind him. The lock's click echoed like a death nail. Darkness swallowed him whole. No, not complete darkness. Thin moonlight filtered through a barred window set high in the wall, painting the cell in shades of silver and shadow. Darien pushed himself to his knees, breathing hard, and looked around his prison. The cell was larger than expected. 20 feet across, maybe 25. Bare stone walls, no furniture, a bucket. In one corner water, he hoped, not waste. And on the far side something moved. Chains rattled. Darien froze. His eyes adjusted slowly, picking out details in the gloom. There were shackles embedded in the far wall, thick iron bands connected by chains that glowed faintly with etched symbols. And bound within those chains was a figure that made his heart forget how to beat. A woman. No, not quite. She crouched in a predatory stance, muscles coiled beneath torn armor that had once been black, but was now stained with old blood and newer wounds. Her hair fell in wild tangles around a face that was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. High cheekbones, sharp features, skin pale as winter frost, and eyes gods above those eyes that burned crimson in the darkness, glowing like embers in a dying fire. A vampire. They'd locked him in a cell with a vampire. She studied him with those burning eyes, head tilted slightly, and he saw intelligence there. Not the mindless hunger he'd expected, but calculation, assessment. She was deciding something about him, and he had the distinct impression his life depended on whatever conclusion she reached. "They usually scream first," she said, and her voice was rough, as if she hadn't spoken in days. Weeks. "You're quiet." Darien forced himself to breathe, to think. Would screaming help? No. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. But it would be honest. She moved then, a blur of speed that sent his instinct screaming. She lunged forward, chains snapping taut, fangs bared in a snarl that was pure predator. The shackle stopped her 3 feet away from him, but he'd still thrown himself backward, scrambling until his back hit the wall. His heart hammered, his hand shook. She stayed at the end of her chains, frozen in that attack posture, and studied him again. Then, slowly, she retreated back to her corner, sat down, wrapped the chains around her wrists as if to restrain herself further. "There," she said quietly. "Now you're afraid. Good. Fear will keep you alive longer. How long is longer? Darian managed, hating the tremor in his voice. 3 days. She leaned her head back against the stone. That's how long they usually last. 3 days before I can't control it anymore. Before the hunger makes me forget why I shouldn't. Then the guards come back and collect what's left. Darian's blood turned to ice. You've done this before. 17 times. Her eyes closed. 17 men they threw in here, expecting me to tear them apart. And I did. Eventually, every time her eyes opened again, finding his. They call it entertainment. Call me their wild huntress who can't be tamed. They make wagers on how long each prisoner will survive. Then why? He stopped, swallowed. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. She shifted and moonlight caught on wounds he hadn't noticed before. Burns across her wrists and throat where the shackles touched. Her skin. Silver. He realized they bound her with silver. You deserve to know that I don't want to kill you, that I've tried to break these chains 1,000 times, that I'm sorry. Something in her voice, a note of genuine pain, of self-loathing, made him look at her differently. Not as a monster about to kill him, but as a prisoner just like himself. Maybe even more trapped than he was. How long since you fed? He asked quietly. Her laugh was bitter. 6 weeks. They keep me on the edge. Starving enough to be dangerous. Not starving enough to lose consciousness. She rattled her chains. These runes, they suppress my strength. Keep me weak. If I could break them, I'd tear through those doors and paint these halls with the blood of every guard in this fortress. But I can't. So, I stay here and I wait for the hunger to make me into the monster they want me to be. Darian sat in silence, processing. Outside, he heard the guards laughing, heard coins changing hands, making their bets. He studied the vampire woman across from him. She'd pulled her knees to her chest, making herself smaller, and there was something unbearably tired in the slump of her shoulders. How long had she been here? How many prisoners had she been forced to kill? Each death adding weight to chains that weren't just silver, but guilt. What's your name? He asked. She went still, stared at him as if he'd asked something impossible. Why does that matter? Because if we're going to die in here together, I'd rather know the name of the person I'm dying with. For a long moment she said nothing. Then so quietly, he almost didn't hear. Nix. My name is Nix. Darian. He didn't extend his hand. Knew better than to get within reach of those chains. Whatever happens. Nix, I want you to know I don't blame you for what they're forcing you to become. Her eyes widened. For just a second, he saw past the predator, past the hunger and the fury to the person beneath. A person who'd been trapped in this nightmare far longer than 3 days, who'd been forced to be a weapon and an executioner, who'd lost count of how many times she'd begged the universe for a different ending. Then she looked away back into her corner, and her walls came back up. You should sleep, she said, voice empty again. Well, you still can while I can still let you. But Darian didn't sleep. He stayed awake. Through that first night, back pressed to the wall, watching the vampire woman who wouldn't meet his eyes, watching her tremble with restraint, watching her whisper to herself in a language he didn't understand, words that sounded like prayers or curses or both. And when dawn's first light crept through the window, painting her face in shades of gold, she finally looked at him again. You're still alive, she said, and he couldn't tell if she was surprised or disappointed or relieved. So are you, he replied. She blinked as if she hadn't thought of it that way, as if she'd stopped thinking of herself as alive a long time ago. The second night was worse than the first. Darian had spent the daylight Hours watching Nyx with careful attention, learning the rhythms of her restraint. She would press herself as far from him as the chains allowed, forehead against the stone, breathing in slow, measured counts. 10 breaths. 20. 50. Then she'd shake, muscles locked, and he'd see the war happening. Inside her. Hunger against will. Instinct against choice, the monster. They'd made her against the person she'd been before. She won each battle, but every victory cost her. He could see it. In the way she grew paler as hours passed, in the faint tremor that started in her hands and spread to her whole body. By midday, she couldn't speak anymore. Could only stare at the wall and count breaths and fight. Darian had discovered the bucket held water, stale, but drinkable. He drank sparingly, knowing it was probably meant to last the full 3 days. And he'd noticed Nyx hadn't moved toward it once. When twilight painted the cell purple, he made a decision. Nyx. He kept his voice low, gentle. When did you last drink water? She didn't answer. Didn't even turn her head. Nyx. Look at me. Finally, slowly she did. Her eyes were dimmer than before, the crimson glow flickering like a candle on the edge of going out. There were new burns on her wrists. She'd tested the chains again, he realized. Had tried to break free before the hunger made her do something irreversible. I need you to listen, he continued. You're dehydrated. That's making everything worse. The hunger, the weakness, the pain. Your body needs water, even if it's not blood. I can't. Her voice was barely a whisper. If I move, if I come even one step closer to you, the water's in the corner, opposite side from me. You don't have to come near me to reach it. She shook her head. A minute movement. The scent, your heartbeat. It's so loud. Darian. Every pulse I can hear it. And it sounds like promises. Like relief. If I move, if I let myself have even that much freedom, then I'll close my eyes. He did so immediately. I won't watch. I won't make it harder. Silence. He kept his eyes closed, listening. Heard her chains shift. Heard her breathing quicken. Panic or temptation. He couldn't tell. Why are you helping me? The question came out raw. Because we're both prisoners here. Because you've been fighting alone for too long. Because someone should help you, Nyx. Even if it's just with water. More silence. Then finally movement. The chains sang. Their low music as she stood. As she crossed the few feet to the bucket. He heard her drink. Desperate, gulping sounds, and tried not to think about how close she was now. How easy it would be for her to close the distance between bucket and where he sat, but she didn't. She drank, and then he heard her retreat back to her corner. Only when the chains settled did he open his eyes again. Nyx was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Something between gratitude and grief. You're an idiot, she said, but there was no heat in it. So I've been told. I could have killed you just now. The water, the movement. It made the hunger worse, not better. But you didn't kill me. No. She looked down at her hands at the burns the silver left. I didn't. But I wanted to. Gods above. I wanted to. Darian shifted, leaning forward slightly. How many of the others tried to talk to you? Tried to see you as something other than a monster? She went very still. I'm guessing none of them. He continued quietly. They screamed, begged maybe. Tried to fight, but none of them saw you. None of them asked your name or tried to help with the water or acknowledged that you were suffering too. I killed them. Her voice broke. It doesn't matter what they saw or didn't see. In the end I tore them apart and drank them dry and proved the court right. That I'm nothing but a wild thing that can't be tamed. That you're a person trapped in an impossible situation, forced to do terrible things to survive. Darian held her gaze. That doesn't make you a monster. That makes you a victim. Nyx laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. You don't know what I am. What I was before they locked me in here. I was a huntress. Darian. One of the court's best. I tracked humans through forests and dragged them back for feasts. I followed orders without question, killed without hesitation. I was everything they wanted me to be until she stopped, looked away until he prompted, until they ordered me to kill children. The words came out flat dead. A village that refused to pay tribute. The court wanted an example made. Wanted every family slaughtered, especially the young ones. Wanted fear spread across the territories. She pulled her knees up again, wrapped her arms around them. I refused. First time I'd ever disobeyed an order. They were surprised. What did they do? Called me defective. Said I'd gone soft, lost my edge. Labeled me too unstable for service. Her smile was razor sharp. So they threw me in here. Told me I'd earn my freedom back once I proved I could still kill on command. 17 prisoners later, I still haven't been released. I don't think they ever plan to let me out. This is my life now. An endless parade of dying men and their knowledge that I'm becoming exactly what they always said I was. Darian absorbed this, pieces clicking together. You said, the chains suppress your powers. What powers? She glanced at the shackles, at the glowing runes etched into the metal. My bloodline has gifts. Even among vampires, we're different, stronger, faster. We can manipulate blood magic in ways others can't. She touched one of the runes and it flared brighter, making her flinch. These were made specifically to hold someone like me. They drain my strength, yes, but more than that, they prevent me from using blood magic. Without it, I can't break free. What would it take to break the runes? Power. They don't possess. She said it casually, but Darian heard the weight beneath. Blood magic from a willing source. Someone offering their life force freely with intent and purpose. The runes were designed to resist force, not willing sacrifice. Her eyes found his, but that's impossible. What prisoner would willingly give their blood to a starving vampire? The question hung between them, and Darian felt the shape of an answer forming. Not. No. She was too weak. He was too uncertain. But the seed was planted. An understanding that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this that didn't end with his corpse on the floor. Tell me about your bloodline, he said instead, changing the subject to something safer. Where did you come from before all this? And to his surprise, Nyx began to speak. She told him about the Crimson Vale, a place that sounded like something from forgotten legends. An ancient city built into mountainside cliffs where her kind had lived for millennia before the courts rose to power. She described towers that pierced clouds, fountains that ran with preserved blood from willing donors, a society that had once believed in balance between predator and prey. We weren't always monsters, she said softly. Once, centuries ago, there were agreements. Humans offered blood in exchange for protection, for extended life, for vampire strength against other dangers. It was symbiotic, respectful. She leaned her head back against the wall. Then something changed. The courts grew greedy, stopped honoring the old pacts, decided humans were cattle, not partners. The veil fell, abandoned by both sides. And people like me were raised to be weapons instead of guardians. Darian listened, fascinated despite their circumstances. This was a history no human knew. Glimpses of a world that existed in shadows and whispers. "Do you remember it?" he asked. "The veil barely. I was taken young for training, but I remember red mist in the morning, black trees. That grew nowhere else. And I remember feeling safe." She smiled sadly. "Strange, isn't it? A vampire feeling safe. But I did before the courts came. Before everything changed." They talked through the night. Darian told her about his village, about the families he tried to save, about the moment he decided that survival wasn't worth the cost of his humanity. Nyx told him about her training, about the hunts, about the slow erosion of her soul until the day she'd stood in that village and couldn't make herself hurt a child. By the time dawn approached, they'd both said more than they'd intended, shared more than was wise. And when the light began to filter through the window again, Nyx spoke the words that had been building all night. "They want you to fear me," she said, eyes locked on his across the cell. "Everything about this place, this situation is designed to make you terrified, to make you see me as the enemy." She paused. "Why don't you?" Darian considered his answer carefully. "Because fear is what they want. Because I've seen who you really are, and that person deserves something better than my terror." He smiled slightly. "And because I think we're more alike than either of us expected." Nyx stared at him for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes, and he could have sworn he saw her shaking, not from hunger this time, but from something else entirely. "Thank you," she whispered. 2 words. But they carried the weight of someone who'd forgotten what kindness felt like, who'd stopped believing anyone would see past the monster to the person beneath. Darian didn't respond, just stayed where he was, giving her space to feel whatever she needed to feel. The second day ended without bloodshed. But outside the door, he heard the guards muttering. Surprised, confused. The bets were being recalculated. One more day until they expected a corpse. One more day to decide what came next. The third morning arrived with an ache in Darian's bones. He'd barely slept, torn between exhaustion and the visceral awareness that their time was running out. The guards would come tomorrow, expecting death. Finding him alive would complicate their entertainment, their narrative of the untamable vampire who killed everything thrown at her. He doubted they'd simply let him walk out. Across the cell, Nyx hadn't moved in hours. She sat perfectly still. A statue, carved from moonlight and hunger, and Darian had learned enough to recognize what that stillness meant. She was using every ounce of willpower to maintain control. 3 days without feeding, her body was consuming itself, and soon there wouldn't be anything left to fight with. "Nyx," he said quietly. No response. "Nyx, I need you to talk to me." "Can't." The word was barely a breath. "If I speak, if I move, if I do anything, but stay perfectly still, then I'll keep talking. You just listen." He leaned forward, keeping his voice steady. "I've been thinking about what you said about the blood magic, the runes, the way out." Her eyes opened, burning red in the dim light. "You said breaking the chains requires willing sacrifice. Someone freely giving their blood with intent." He held her gaze. "What if I did that? What if I chose to help you break free?" "No." The word came out sharp, panicked. "Darian. No. You don't understand what you're offering." "Then explain it to me." She was shaking now, and he couldn't tell if it was fear or hunger or both. "The runes require significant blood, not just a few drops." And the process, she stopped, swallowed hard. "If I started drinking, truly drinking, I don't know if I could stop. 3 days starving and—" "You're offering yourself like—" She made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "It would be suicide. Or it would be freedom for both of us." Darian kept his voice calm. "Reasonable. Think about it. The guards expect me dead tomorrow. If we wait, if we let this play out their way, I die and you're still trapped. But if we break the chains now, if we fight our way out. Together. She repeated the word like it was foreign. You truly believe we could escape this fortress, that they'd let us? I believe we have a better chance together than we do separated. I believe you're stronger than you think. And I believe, he paused, surprised by the truth of what he was about to say. I believe I'd rather die trying to save us both than die proving their point about you. Nick stared at him, and for the first time since he'd entered the cell, he saw hope flicker in her expression. Small, fragile, terrified of being crushed. But there. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk this for someone like me? Because someone should. Because you've been alone in this nightmare for too long. Because Darien hesitated, then pushed forward. Because in 3 days, you've shown me more humanity than most humans I've known. You're not the monster they say you are, Nix. You're just someone who's been hurt and used and broken by people who don't deserve your loyalty. She closed her eyes and he saw tears escape down her pale cheeks. Silver tears that caught the light like mercury. If we do this, she said slowly, if you really offer your blood, to break these chains you need to understand what happens. Blood magic creates bonds. Especially blood given freely with emotion behind it. You'd be tied to me, Darien. You'd feel what I feel, know what I know, and her voice broke. I'd be responsible for you in ways that go beyond anything humans understand. If you died, if you were hurt, I'd feel it. If I lost control, if I took too much, then we'll be careful. He meant it. We'll do this together consciously. You tell me when to stop. I'll trust. You. Trust. She laughed bitterly. You're offering trust to a vampire who's killed 17 men. I'm offering trust to a woman who fought against killing 17 men. And hated herself for losing that fight every single time. The distinction landed. He saw it in the way her shoulders dropped, in the way her expression shifted from self-loathing to something softer. Not quite acceptance, but close. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the decision settling between them. Outside, the fortress was waking. They heard footsteps in distant corridors, the change of guard, morning routines that marked the passage of time toward tomorrow's expected discovery. Tell me your story, Nick said. Finally. Not the summary. The truth. What led you here? What made you someone who'd sacrifice himself for a stranger? So Darien told her. He spoke of his village, small and struggling on the border territories where vampire rule pressed heaviest. He described his father, a blacksmith who taught him that strength wasn't just muscle, but the willingness to protect those weaker than yourself. His mother, who'd sung songs about old times when vampires and humans had lived in harmony before the courts corrupted everything. He told her about the night the raid came, how the vampire soldiers had surrounded the village with orders to collect tribute. 10 families surrendered for feeding and service. How the village elder had tried to negotiate, had offered other payment, had begged. They killed him in front of everyone, Darien said quietly. Made an example. Then they started choosing families at random. He could still see it, still hear the screams. I had a sword, my father's sword. I was decent with it. Good enough to patrol the borders and drive off bandits. And I thought, he laughed bitterly, I thought I could make a difference. You fought, Nick said. I fought. Rallied some of the other young men. We managed to buy time for 3 families to escape into the forest. Killed 2 vampire soldiers in the process. He touched his ribs where bruises still act. Then the rest of them overwhelmed us. Dragged me here for execution. The others I don't know, probably dead. Nix was quiet for a moment. Then the soldiers you killed. Did you know their names? No. Does it matter? Yes. She met his eyes because I might have. I served with many units before they locked me away. If you give me descriptions, I could tell you who they were. Whether they were cruel or just following orders. Whether she stopped, whether they deserved what you did. Darian hadn't expected that. Hadn't thought about the vampires he'd killed as individuals with names and histories. They'd been the enemy, the monsters, the ones taking people he loved. But Nick saw them differently. Saw them as she saw herself. People caught in a system that turned them into weapons. One was tall, he said slowly. Scar across his face. Laughed when he grabbed a child. Then Nix's voice went flat. He enjoyed the terror. Volunteered for raids because he liked hurting people. The court kept him because he was effective, not because he was honorable. She looked at Darian. If you killed him, you did the world a service. And the other young couldn't have been. Turned more than a few years. Hesitated before following orders. Nix's expression grew sad. Could have been a dozen soldiers. The court turns humans regularly. Promises them power and eternal life. Most don't realize what they're giving up until it's too late. Until they're bound by blood oaths and compulsion. Forced to follow orders they hate. She touched her chains. That's why I couldn't kill those children. I'd seen too many young vampires turned against their will, losing themselves piece by piece. Couldn't add to it. Couldn't be part of the cycle. Understanding washed through. Darian, you weren't just refusing an order. You were trying to break the pattern. Yes. And they punished me for it by making me the worst version of what I tried to stop being. She looked at her hands. 17 deaths. 17 people who might have been rebels like you might have had families and dreams and reasons to fight. And I took that from them because I was too weak to starve. Too broken to resist forever. You were surviving, Darian said firmly. That's not the same as choosing to kill. Isn't it? She met his eyes and the pain there was ancient. At what point does survival become complicity? At what point am I responsible for the monster they've made me into? It was a question Darian couldn't answer. Not definitively, but he could offer perspective. You're responsible the moment you stop fighting, he said. The moment you accept what they say you are and stop trying to be anything else. You haven't done that, Nix. You're still fighting, still. Choosing restraint even when it costs everything. That matters. That counts. She stared at him and something in her expression cracked open. The careful walls she'd built, the distance she'd maintained, it all crumbled and he saw a raw emotion beneath. Grief. Shame. Desperate, fragile hope. I don't deserve your faith, she whispered. Neither do I, probably. But we have it anyway. So what are we going to do with it? The question hung between them. Outside, they heard keys rattling. Guards making rounds, checking locks. The sound made Nix tense, made her eyes glow brighter with barely suppressed hunger and hatred. If we do this, she said slowly, if we break the chains and try to escape, they'll hunt us. Every vampire in this fortress. Every soldier in the territory. They won't let me go easily. I know too much about their operations, their weaknesses. And you've already killed their soldiers. They'll want you dead even more now. So we run fast and far. Darian felt a grim smile cross his face. Better than dying in here without trying. There's a place, Nick said quietly. The Crimson Veil. I told you about it before. It's abandoned, forgotten by the courts. If we could reach it, it's weeks away through dangerous territory. But she stopped. There are things there. Knowledge the courts don't have ways to hide to. Protect ourselves. Maybe even ways to fight back. Then that's where we go. Darian stood slowly, careful not to approach too quickly. After we break those chains, after we get out of here, we run for the veil and we figure out the rest when we're not locked in a cell. Nick stood as well, chains singing their low warning. She looked at him across the distance that separated them. Barely 10 feet, but it might as well have been miles for all the danger it represented. Last chance, she said. Last chance to take it back. To stay quiet, let tomorrow come. Die without making this complicated. I don't want simple, Darian replied. I want to live. And I want you to live. Too, Nix. Really live, not just survive in a cage. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. When she opened them again, the decision was made. Then we do this at sunset, she said. When the guards change shift. They're less attentive then, more focused on rotations than what's happening in cells. She extended one shackled hand. When the time comes, you'll need to cut your palm. Press it. To this rune here. She indicated a specific symbol on her chains. And speak these words after me. She taught him the phrase in her language, made him repeat it until the pronunciation was perfect. Ancient words. That meant freely given, willingly offered, bound by choice, not chains. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Nix explained what to expect. The pain when the runes activated, the rush of power when her abilities returned, the disorientation of the blood bond forming. Darian committed every detail to memory, understanding that mistakes could cost both their lives. As sunset approached, he could feel the tension rising. Nix grew quieter, more still, gathering her strength for what was coming. And Darian sat with his father's sword. The guards had left it in the cell mockingly, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The light through the window shifted from gold to crimson, to purple. Somewhere in the fortress, bells rang the evening change. Now Nix whispered. Darian stood, found a sharp edge on his sword and drew it across his palm without hesitation. Blood welled up, crimson and bright, and he saw Nix's eyes lock onto it. Saw her whole body go rigid with want, but she held still, held herself together. Whispered quickly. He crossed the cell, heart hammering, and pressed his bleeding palm to the rune she'd indicated. The metal was cold, the symbol etched deep. He felt it drink his blood, felt something ancient and hungry awaken in the chains. Then he spoke the words she taught him, each syllable careful and deliberate, freely given, willingly offered, bound by choice, not chains. The world exploded in light and pain. Chapter 4. The First Bond. The runes ignited like stars being born. Crimson light erupted from every symbol, etched into the chains, flooding the cell with a radiance so bright Darian had to close his eyes. But closing them didn't help. The light was inside him now, burning through his veins, following the path of his blood from his heart to his hand to the metal drinking from his palm. He heard Nix scream. Not in pain, in release. The sound was primal, ancient, a howl that spoke of years of captivity shattering all at once. The chains around her wrists cracked, and the sound was like thunder. In the enclosed space, one shackle exploded, then another. Fragments of silver and iron shooting across the cell. Darian fell backward, clutching his hand. The rune had seared his palm, left a mark that would never fade, a symbol matching the ones that had bound her. Through his pain, he saw Nick standing free for the first time, silhouetted against the dying light of the broken runes. She looked like a goddess of vengeance. Her eyes blazed crimson, brighter than he'd ever seen. Her body was wreathed in a faint red aura, power radiating from her in waves. He could feel against his skin. She flexed her hands, testing the absence of chains, and he watched muscles move. Beneath her torn armor. Sleek, powerful, lethal. Then she looked at him and her expression shifted. The fury drained. Away, replaced by concern. Darien. She crossed the cell in a blur, kneeling. Beside him before he could register she'd moved. Her hands, no longer shaking, no longer restrained, reached. For his injured palm. Let me see. He showed her. The burn was bad. The symbol. Etched into his flesh and raised angry lines. It throbbed with every heartbeat. And he could have sworn it glowed faintly in the darkness. The bond mark, Nyx whispered. She turned his hand gently examining the symbol. I have the same but deeper. She showed him her wrist where the shackle had been. Beneath the silver burns, a matching symbol was carved into her. Skin, crimson and pulsing. We're connected now. Blood to blood. Life to life. Before Darien could respond, voices erupted outside the cell. The guards had heard the explosion, heard Nyx's scream. Keys rattled in the lock. Nyx's head snapped toward the door, and her expression went cold. Predatory. How many? Darien managed, pushing himself to his feet despite the pain. 3. Just outside. More coming. She tilted her head, listening to sounds he couldn't perceive. They're afraid. They should be. The door swung open and 2 guards rushed through with weapons drawn. They saw Nyx free of her chains and froze, fear washing across their faces. Impossible. One started. He didn't finish. Nyx moved like lightning. One moment she was beside Darien. The next she was in front of the guards faster than human eyes could track. She caught. The first guard's sword arm twisted and the bone shattered with a wet crack. He screamed. She silenced him with a strike to the throat that sent him crashing into the wall unconscious before he hit the floor. The second guard swung at her. His blade should have taken her head. Instead, she simply wasn't there anymore. Ducking under his swing and coming up inside his guard, her palm struck his chest and Darien heard ribs crack. The guard went down gasping. 3 seconds. 2 guards disabled. No killing blows, he noticed. She could have torn them apart, but she'd chosen restraint even in her moment of freedom. The third guard, smarter than his companions, had stayed in the doorway. Now he turned and ran, screaming for reinforcements. So much for stealth, Darien muttered, grabbing his sword from where it lay. Forgotten. There was never going to be stealth. Nyx was at the door now. Listening. They'll seal the corridor, trap us in this section. We have maybe 3 minutes before every soldier in the fortress converges on this position. Then we move fast. Which way? Follow me. Stay close. She glanced back at him and there was something fierce and protective in her gaze. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understand? If you think I'm leaving you, Darien. She crossed back to him, moved so quickly, he didn't have time to react before her hands cupped his face. The touch was gentle despite her strength, despite everything. I can feel you now. Through the bond. I feel your determination, your fear, your refusal to abandon me. She stopped. Swallowed. It's more than I've felt in centuries. But you need to understand I can survive things you can't. If it comes down to your life or mine, I need you to choose yours. Why? Because you're the first person in 100 years who's seen me as something other than a weapon or a monster. Her thumbs brushed his cheekbones, the gesture achingly tender. Because you gave me freedom when you could have chosen safety. Because she stopped something breaking in her expression. Because I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I just found you. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Then alarm bells began, ringing throughout the fortress, shattering the moment. Later, Nick said, pulling back, "If we survive this, we'll talk about what this bond means. But right now we run." She grabbed his hand, the unmarked one, and pulled him through. The door. The corridor beyond was chaos. Guards were scrambling, some toward them, others running for weapons or reinforcements. Nyx led Darien through the confusion, with preternatural grace, her supernatural senses guiding them through passages that twisted and turned like a maze. They encountered resistance almost immediately. A squad of 6 soldiers blocked their path, crossbows raised down. Nyx shoved Darien behind her as bolts flew. She moved in a blur, dodging projectiles that would have killed him. Instantly, one bolt grazed her shoulder. She didn't even flinch, just kept moving forward, closing the distance before the guards could reload. What followed was beautiful and terrible. Nyx fought like something from legend. Every movement precise, efficient, devastating. She disarmed the first soldier and used his own weapon against the others. Spun through their defensive formation like a dancer. Too fast to track. Disabled threats with brutal accuracy. But still, even in combat, even driven by years of captivity and rage, she pulled her killing blows, broke bones instead of necks, knocked soldiers unconscious instead of tearing out throats. She was proving something. Darien realized to herself, to him, maybe to the universe, that she was more than what they tried to make her. Stairs. She pointed to a descending passage. The river passage is 2 levels down. If we can reach it. A crossbow bolt slammed into her back. Nick stumbled, gasping, and Darien saw the bolt protruding from just below her shoulder blade. Silver tip, glowing with the same runes that had bound her chains. Poison, he realized with horror. They'd expected her escape, had prepared weapons specifically designed to slow her down. Nyx, keep moving. She straightened. Despite the obvious pain, despite the poison already spreading through her system. I can heal from this, but not if they hit me with 3 more. They ran down stairs that seemed to descend, forever through passages that grew damper, colder behind them. The sound of pursuit echoed and multiplied. The entire fortress was mobilizing. The bond between them was growing stronger. Darien could feel it now. Feel the edges of Nyx's pain mixing with his own. Could sense her determination overriding agony. Her will keeping her body moving despite the poison working. To shut it down. They burst into a larger chamber. And Darien heard it. The rush of water. An underground river black as ink in the darkness. There. Nyx pointed to where the water disappeared into a tunnel carved through solid rock. That passage leads outside the fortress. Walls. Rapids, falls, extremely dangerous. Better than staying here. Agreed. She turned to face the entrance they'd come through already. Footsteps thundered above them, getting closer. She looked at him, and there was fear in her eyes now, not of dying but of failing him. I'm going to slow them down. You jump. Start moving downstream. I'll catch up. No, Darien. I can't swim. Well, right now. The poison. Then I'm definitely not leaving you. He moved to the water's edge, tested the current. Fast, strong, cold enough to steal breath. We jumped together. I'll help you. You can barely help yourself in water this. Powerful. Good thing we're bonded then. Your strength, my stubbornness. He held out his hand, the marked one, the one that connected them now in ways neither fully understood. Trust me like I trusted you. Nick stared at his hand, at him, at the impossible offer he was making. Then soldiers poured into the chamber, and she was out of time to argue. She grabbed his hand, and they jumped. The water was a shock of cold that stole all thought. Darian plunged deep, lost in blackness and current, and felt Nyx's grip on his hand as the only tether to reality. The poison in her system was affecting her coordination, her strength. Without it, she could have controlled their descent. With it, they were both at the river's mercy. They surfaced, gasping, and the current immediately seized them. Rocks loomed out of darkness. Darian felt them tumble, felt the water try to tear them apart. But their hands stayed locked. The bond between them, stronger than the forces trying to separate them. Above, through the roar of water, he heard guards shouting. Heard crossbows firing. Bolts splashed around them, but the current was too fast. Visibility too poor. Within seconds, they'd been swept beyond accurate range. The river carried them through absolute darkness, through passages that couldn't be navigated consciously. Darian lost track of time, of direction, of everything except the cold and the water and Nyx's hand in his. He held on with everything he had, refusing to let go, even when his muscles screamed, even when he couldn't tell which way was up anymore. Then suddenly they were falling. A waterfall plunging down into a pool Darian couldn't see. They hit hard, went under deep, and this time the impact tore their hands apart. He flailed, searching for her, panicking, as the bond between them screamed warning. She was hurt, disoriented, sinking. He found her in the darkness, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and kicked upward with everything he had. His lungs were burning, his vision going dark. But he kicked and finally, impossibly, they broke the surface. They'd made it outside. Somehow they'd made it outside the fortress. Darian dragged them both to shore, to a rocky bank where moonlight filtered through trees. He pulled Nyx from the water and collapsed beside her, both of them gasping, shaking from cold and adrenaline and relief. You, Nyx, coughed water. You're an idiot. You mentioned that before. I could have drowned you. Didn't, though. She turned her head to look at him, and in the moonlight her eyes were softer than he'd ever seen them. Thank you for not leaving me. For she stopped, reached up to touch his face with shaking fingers. For everything. Darian caught her hand, held it against his cheek. We're not done yet. Poison. You need blood. Need to heal. I'll manage. There are animals in these forests. No. He sat up despite his exhaustion. You'll use mine through the bond. However that works, Darian, I've already taken from you. The bond's formation, the magic. It cost you blood even if I didn't drink directly. Taking more could save your life. He met her eyes. Then we do it. We didn't escape just so you could die slowly from poison. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Not here. Too exposed. The fortress will send hunters. She pushed herself up, wincing as the movement aggravated her wounds. There's a shrine, old vampire shrine, abandoned half a mile north. We can rest therein. I'll show you what the bond makes possible. They helped each other stand. Two people who'd been enemies by design, prisoners by fate, and were now something else entirely. Something neither had words for yet. Something that felt like salvation and doom in equal measure. They stumbled north through the forest, leaving the fortress and its screams and its chains behind them, and neither noticed the shadows watching from the trees, golden eyes tracking their passage. The hunters were already on their trail. The shrine materialized from the forest like a ghost from forgotten prayers. It was small, barely larger than the cell they'd escaped, built from black stone that seemed to swallow moonlight. Carved symbols covered every surface. Not the binding runes from Nyx's chains, but older marks that spoke of protection. And sanctuary, a place that predated the vampire courts that remembered when her kind sought. Places of peace rather than conquest. Here, Nyx leaned heavily against the entrance. The poison in her system was spreading visibly now, dark veins creeping up her neck from the wound in her back. Her movements had grown sluggish. Her breathing labored. Safe for tonight. The shrine still holds power. Makes it hard to track, hard to find. Darien helped her inside. The interior was sparse. Stone altar. Remnants of old offerings. A few faded tapestries depicting scenes he didn't recognize. But it was dry and defensible with only one entrance to watch. Sit. He guided Nyx to the ground, positioned her so he could see the crossbow bolt still embedded in her back. Silver shaft with glowing runes driven deep between her shoulder blades. I need to remove this. Will hurt. Silver burns even when it's leaving. I know, but the poison won't stop until the source is out. He knelt behind her, studying the wound. I'll be as quick as I can. She nodded, braced herself against the altar. Do it. Darien gripped the bolt shaft, said a quick prayer to gods he wasn't sure he believed in anymore, and pulled. The silver came out slow, fighting him, and Nyx's scream echoed through the shrine. But the bolt came free, and he threw it as far from them as possible. Black blood welled from the wound, thick with poison. Nyx slumped forward, gasping, and Darien could feel her pain through their bond. It hit him like a physical blow, burning agony radiating from her back, mixing with the deep exhaustion dragging at her consciousness. The poison she managed. It's silver-based, designed to prevent vampire healing. Without blood, without strength it will. She coughed and crimson stained her lips. Hours, maybe less. Then we don't have hours to waste. Darien moved in front of her. Melt so they were eye to eye. Tell me what to do. Tell me how. The bond works for healing. Nyx looked at him and her expression was complex. Gratitude and guilt and something deeper that neither of them had acknowledged yet. It's not like feeding normally. The bond allows for transfer. You give willingly with intention. I receive consciously with control. Your blood becomes mine. My strength becomes yours. But she hesitated. It's intimate more than you're expecting. I trust you. You shouldn't. Not with this. Not when I'm this desperate. But even as she protested, he saw the hunger in her eyes. 3 days of starvation hadn't been solved by their escape. She was still weak, still fighting needs that went bone deep. If I lose control, if I take too much, you won't. He took her hand, the one that bore the matching bond mark. Because you've been fighting for control since the moment we met. Because you're not the monster they tried to make you. And because he squeezed her fingers gently. Because I believe in you, Nyx. More than you believe in yourself right now. She stared at him, and for a moment, he thought she'd refuse. Then, she closed her eyes, took a shuddering breath, and nodded. Your wrist, she said quietly. The mark you already bear. Press it to mine. That's where the bond is strongest, where the transfer happens most easily. Darien did as instructed. The moment their marked skin touched, he felt it. A connection snapping into sharp focus. Suddenly, he could feel her emotions. Clearly. The pain, the fear, the desperate hunger wearing with fierce protectiveness. Could sense her essence, herself in ways that went beyond physical sensation. And he realized she could feel him too. His determination. His trust, his affection. Was that what this warmth was? This sense that she'd become essential in impossible ways. Now, Nyx whispered, her other hand rising to cradle his jaw. Stay with me. Keep your awareness centered. When you Feel me drawing blood, don't panic. Don't pull away. Just breathe and let the bond carry us both. He felt her fangs extend. Felt them press against his wrist, right over the bond mark. Then pressure a sharp sting and the world exploded into sensation. It wasn't like he'd imagined. There was no pain, no horror of being fed upon. Instead, it was connection. He felt his blood flowing into her, but also felt her gratitude flowing back into him. Felt her life force intertwining with his two separate existences becoming briefly entangled. He could sense her healing the poison, being pushed back by the influx of his blood. His life, his willingly given strength, could feel her body using what he offered to repair damage, to restore function, to fight back against the toxins trying to shut her down. But more than that, he could feel her. Really feel her. The depths of her loneliness, carried across centuries. The weight of the lives she'd taken, each death a scar. On her soul. The desperate hope that maybe somehow she could be more than what the courts had made her, and she could feel him. His memories of family, of loss, of choosing to fight even when fighting seemed futile. His fear that he'd die without making a difference. His surprise at finding someone who understood what it meant to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control. They shared everything in that moment. No barriers, no defenses. Just raw, honest truth flowing between them through blood and magic in something that felt suspiciously like. Nyx pulled back, gasping, and the connection dimmed to something manageable. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, both shaken by the intimacy of what had just occurred. Nyx touched her lips where traces of his blood remained. That was intense. Yes. She looked down at his wrist. The bite marks were already closing. Vampire. Saliva had healing properties. He remembered distantly. Are you all right? Did I take too much? Darian checked himself. He was tired, drained, but not dangerously so. I'm fine. You. She flexed her shoulders experimentally. The wound in her back was closing. The poison purged from her system. Color was returning to her skin. Strength to her limbs. Better. Much better. She met his eyes. Thank you. Again. I seem to keep saying that. You're welcome again. They sat in silence for a moment, processing. Through the bond, Darian could feel that she was as off balance as he was, that the feeding had been as much revelation as healing for her. Finally she spoke. What you felt, what I showed you accidentally, was honest and painful and beautiful in a terrible way. He reached out, brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. You've survived things that would have broken most people, Nyx. The loneliness, the guilt, the endless cycle of being used. But you saw the deaths too, the people I've killed, the orders I follow before I learned to question them. Her voice cracked. How? Can you look at me and not see a monster? Because I also saw you refusing to kill children. Saw you spending decades running rather than become a tool for ritual sacrifice. Saw you choosing to starve for 3 days rather than kill me. He cupped her face, made her meet his eyes. I see someone who's been hurt and forced to do terrible things, but who never stopped trying to be better. That's not a monster. That's a hero who doesn't know she's heroic. Nyx made a sound between a laugh and a sob. I'm not. You are. He said it with absolute conviction. And I'm honored to be bonded to you. She closed her eyes, leaned into his touch, and he felt through their connection how desperately she wanted to believe him. How terrified she was of hoping for redemption she didn't think she'd earned. We should rest, she said. Finally, pulling back before the moment could deepen further. The bond transfer took energy from both of us. And the hunters, she tilted her head. listening to sounds Darien couldn't perceive. They'll be tracking us. The court won't let me escape again. They've been chasing me for too long to give up now. How long have you been running? 43 years. She said it casually, but he felt the weight of those decades through their bond. Since the first time I escaped their ritual chamber. They keep finding me, capturing me, preparing the ceremony, and I keep escaping before they can complete it. What ritual? Darien settled with his back against the altar, positioning himself where he could watch the entrance. What do they want from you that's worth 43 years of hunting? Nyx was quiet for a long time. Then slowly she began to speak. My bloodline is rare. One of the original 13 families from the Crimson Veil from before the courts rose to power. We carry abilities most vampires don't. Blood magic, yes, but more than that, we can manipulate the boundaries between this world and the realm our kind came from. Vampires came from another realm. Millennia ago. A place of eternal night and strange power. My ancestors fled. Here, seeking refuge from something dark that had corrupted our homeland. She stared at the symbols carved into the shrine walls, but they left a doorway, a portal sealed by ancient magic guarded by the veil, and the courts want to open it. Darien felt ice in his veins. Why? What's on the other side? Power, knowledge. Weapons from a civilization that makes human kingdoms look like children playing with sticks. Her expression was grim, but also the darkness that drove us through the portal in the first place. Something ancient and hungry that devour everything it touches. And they need you to open this portal. My blood. Specifically given in ritual sacrifice at the site of the original crossing. She looked at him. That's why they've kept me alive all these years. Dead, my blood loses its power. But alive, trapped, drained at the right moment in the right place. I become a key to unleashing either salvation or apocalypse, depending on who wields the power. Darien processed. This pieces clicking together. The Crimson Veil. You said it was abandoned. Is that where the portal is? Yes. Hidden in the deepest chambers beneath the city. She hugged her knees to her chest, suddenly looking younger, more vulnerable. I've been running from my destiny for decades, Darien. Running from the knowledge that my entire existence was designed as a tool for this one purpose. But I'm tired. And now she glanced at their bond marks. Now I've dragged you into it. Connected you to a fate you didn't choose. I chose to help you break those chains. I chose to jump into the river with you. I chose to give you my blood. He reached across the small distance separating them, took her hand. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's what the bond means, right? We're in this together. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. The hunters they'll send, these won't be ordinary soldiers. The bloodhounds, elite trackers, killers, all of them vampires from the original families like mine. They know how I think, how I fight. 3 of them could take down an army. Then I guess we'll need to be smarter than an army. She laughed despite herself, a genuine sound that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. You're insane. So I've been told frequently. They sat together in the quiet of the shrine, hands linked, bond humming between them. Outside, the forest settled into the deep hours of night, and somewhere in the darkness, golden eyes watched and waited. The blood hounds had found their trail. They would attack at dawn. Darien woke to whispers. Not real voices, echoes through the bond. Nyx's dreams bleeding into his consciousness. Fragments of memory and nightmare tangled together. He saw through her eyes a child being taken from human parents who'd sold her for safety. Training grounds where young vampires learned to kill efficiently. Throne room where ancient beings decided fates with casual cruelty. And underneath it all, gnawing and endless. Hunger. He opened his eyes to find Nyx pressed against the far wall of the shrine, as far from him as she could get. She was trembling violently, hands clawed against the stone, breath coming in short gasps. Nyx. He sat up carefully and threw the bond. He felt it. The hunger wasn't gone. The blood he'd given her had healed her wounds, purged the poison, but 3 days of starvation couldn't be solved with one feeding. She was still starving, and every instinct she possessed was screaming at her to feed again. Don't. The word came out strangled. Don't come closer. I can't. What do you need? You two leave. Each word was a battle. Or I'll the hunger. It's so much stronger now. Being healed, having strength back makes it worse. Makes me remember what it feels like to be satisfied, to be full. And you're right. Here. And your heartbeat. She made a sound like a wounded animal. I can hear every pulse. Can smell your blood. Can taste it in my memory, and I want then. Take what you need. No. The word echoed through the shrine, raw and desperate. You don't understand what you're offering. Earlier with the bond, I was focused on healing. I could control myself because I had a purpose beyond hunger. But now her eyes met his and they were more crimson than ever. Pupils blown wide. Now I'm just hungry. Darian. So hungry it hurts. And you're the only food source for miles. And her voice broke. I'm terrified of what I'll do if you stay close. Darian felt her fear. Through the bond. Vast and consuming. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of herself. Afraid of the predator living in her skin. The one that saw him as prey, no matter how much the person inside screamed otherwise. How long can you fight it? Hours, maybe. But I'm not getting stronger. I'm getting weaker. The longer I resist, the harder control becomes. She was crying now, silver tears tracking down her face. I can't kill you. I can't be that person again. But I don't know how to stop being hungry. And a sound outside the shrine. Both of them froze. Footsteps. Multiple sets moving with predatory grace through the forest, converging on their position. And voices low, controlled, speaking in the ancient vampire tongue Nyx had whispered in her sleep. Bloodhounds, Nyx breathed and, through the bond, Darian felt her terror crystallize into something sharper. They found us. How many? She tilted her head, listening with senses far beyond human. 3, maybe 4 surrounding the shrine. Her hands became fists against the stone. They'll wait for dawn. Attack when my senses are dulled by daylight. When I'm at my weakest, which gives us an hour, maybe 2. She pushed off the wall and he saw her forcing herself into combat mindset, pushing the hunger down. Through sheer will. They'll try to take me alive you. They'll kill quickly if you're lucky. Slowly if Ravik is leading them. Who's Ravix? My former mentor. The one who trained me before I was labeled defective. Her expression went cold. He spent 4 decades hunting me, views it as a personal failure that I keep escaping. He won't make mistakes. Darian stood, checked his sword. The blade was still sharp despite their ordeal, and he'd learned enough from watching Nyx fight to know that technique mattered more than strength against supernatural opponents. What's the plan? He asked. You run. There's a passage behind the altar leads deeper. Into the forest. You take it while I know. Darian. We've had this conversation. I don't leave you. He crossed to her, ignored her warning flinch and took her face in his hands. We fight together. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to survive, you need to feed. Told you I can't control, so don't. He said it calmly, clearly. Don't control it. Take what you need. Use the bond to prevent yourself from taking too much. But stop trying to fight your nature. You're a vampire, Nyx. Hunger is part of what you are. Denying it only makes you weaker when we need you strong. She stared at him, shaking her head. You're asking me to trust myself when I've proven I can't be trusted. When 17 people have died because I lost control. 17 people who didn't have a blood bond with you. Who didn't give permission. Who you killed out of desperation, not choice. He held her gaze. I'm giving you choice. I'm giving you permission. And I trust the bond to keep me alive. And if you're wrong, if I drain you dry, and then face the bloodhounds alone, the last person who believed in me dead by my own hand. Her voice cracked. Huh. Do I survive that? The same way you've survived everything else. By being stronger than what they think you are. He pulled her closer until their foreheads touched. Feed, Nyx. Really feed. Be the predator you were trained to be. And then help me kill the bastards hunting us. He felt her resistance crumbling, felt through the bond how desperately she wanted to believe him, how the hunger was screaming that he was offering salvation, but also how terrified she was of proving she was the monster everyone said. Please, he whispered. Trust yourself as much as I trust you. That broke her. She made a sound, half sob, half surrender, and then her mouth was on his throat, fangs extending, piercing skin in a sharp sting that became something else entirely. The bond roared to life, connecting them deeper than before, and Darien felt everything. Her hunger, vast and all-consuming, finally being satisfied. The taste of his blood on her tongue, warm and willing and freely given her euphoria at feeding without guilt, without the weight of 17 unwilling deaths haunting her. And underneath it all, rising like a tide. Emotion deep, fierce, overwhelming emotion that she'd been suppressing since the moment they met. She cared for him maybe more than cared. The bond made it impossible to hide, impossible to deny. What had started as gratitude had transformed into something profound. She'd kill for him, die for him, would fight her own nature and destiny and fade if it meant keeping him safe. And he realized with startling clarity, he felt the same. How had this happened? 4 days ago he'd been a prisoner facing death. Now he was bonded to a vampire, feeding her his blood and feeling emotions he had no names for. This woman, this person who'd shown him vulnerability and strength in equal measure, who'd chosen him over her own survival again and again. He was in love with her. The realization should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt inevitable. Like every choice he'd made since entering that cell had been leading to this moment. Nyx pulled back, gasping. And he felt through the bond that she'd sensed his revelation. She stared at him, eyes wide, his blood on her lips, and between them the truth hung naked and raw. Darien later. He cupped her face, wiped blood from her mouth with his thumb. Bloodhounds first. Feelings later, she laughed a shaky, disbelieving sound. You're impossible and you're stronger now. I can feel it. Through the bond. Full strength, full power. He smiled. So let's introduce your old friends to the new you. The one who's not alone anymore. Nyx took a deep breath and he watched transformation happen. The trembling stopped. The hunger receded to something manageable. She stood taller, moved with the fluid grace he'd seen when she'd first broken her chains. She was magnificent. The passage behind the altar, she said, voice steady now. It doesn't lead away. It leads to high ground. Cliffs. Overlooking the shrine. If you could get up there while I draw them inside. Ambush from above while you engage them directly. Darien nodded. I like it, but I'm not much use against vampires in straight combat. You don't need to kill them. Just distract them. Throw off their timing. She was in tactical mode now. Decades of training kicking in. Ravik fights with precision. He expects his enemies to be predictable. You're human, so he'll dismiss you as a threat. Use that. Be unpredictable. I can do unpredictable. They moved quickly. Nick showed him the hidden passage. Narrow stairs carved into the rock behind the altar, leading up and out through a concealed exit. He'd be exposed during the climb, but if he was quiet, he'd emerge behind their attackers' positions. Wait for my signal, she instructed. When I say your name, not out loud through the bond. That's when you strike. He nodded, started up the stairs, then paused, looked back at her. After this, he said quietly, after we survive this, we talk about the bond, about what we felt, about everything. She smiled, and it was real, genuine, hopeful. I'd like that. He climbed. The passage was treacherous, steep and crumbling, forcing him to move slowly despite urgency. But finally he emerged onto an outcropping above the shrine. From this position he could see the clearing below, and his blood ran cold. For vampires waited in the darkness. No. 5 of the deadliest beings he'd ever seen, each radiating the same predatory power Nyx possessed. They moved with coordinated precision surrounding the shrine's entrance, weapons drawn and leading them. Vampire with silver-white hair and scars across his face that looked like he'd earned them in battles that would have killed anyone else. Ravix. Come out, little bird. Ravix called toward the shrine, voice carrying easily through the quiet night. I know you're in there. I can smell the human's blood on your lips. You fed, regained your strength. Good. I'd hate for this to be too easy. Inside the shrine, Darien felt Nyx's response through the bond. Not fear, determination. She was ready. Had been preparing for this confrontation for decades. One chance, Ravix, her voice echoed from within. Walk away. Take your hunters and leave us alone. Or I'll show you what 43 years of running has taught me. Ravix laughed. Always so dramatic. That's why we kept you, you know. You were the best of my students, the most passionate. It broke my heart when you went defective. He gestured and his hunters moved closer. To the entrance. The court offers mercy. Surrender now and the human dies. Quickly. Resist and we'll make him beg for death while you watch. Third option. Nick said, and Darien heard the smile in her voice. I kill all of you and the human, and I continue our vacation. Then she exploded from the shrine entrance like lightning made flesh. Nyx hit the first hunter before he could react. She moved with speed that made her earlier combat look restrained, powered by the blood she'd finally allowed herself to take. Her strike caught the hunter in the chest, sent him flying backward into a tree. The impact cracked wood and the vampire slumped, dazed. 1 down, 4 to go. The remaining bloodhounds scattered, shifting from ambush formation to combat positions with practiced ease. These weren't common soldiers. They moved like Nyx, thought like her, matched her supernatural grace with their own. Impressive. Ravik circled her slowly. Sword drawn, full strength, well fed. You've been busy during your brief freedom. Tell me, is the human as satisfying as a proper meal? Or have you grown soft in your desperation? I've grown selective. Nyx's hands were empty. She fought unarmed, using speed and precision over weapons. I choose who I feed from now. Choose who deserves my protection. It's remarkably freeing. Ravix, You should try choice sometime instead of blind obedience. He struck without warning. His blade was a blur of silver, aimed for her throat. Nyx twisted, let the sword pass inches from her skin, and countered with a strike to his wrist. He blocked, spun, attacked again. They exchanged blows too fast for human eyes to track, supernatural reflexes clashing in a dance of death. The other hunters moved to flank her. One lunged from her left, another from her right. Nyx couldn't defend against all three. Simultaneously she was good, but outnumbered and outpositioned. Now Darien, her voice in his mind, threw the bond clear as crystal. Darien moved. He'd found a loose rock large. Enough to do damage. He threw it with everything he had, not at Rake 2. Obvious, but at the hunter attacking from the left. The stone caught the vampire in the temple just as he lunged. Not enough to injure seriously, but enough to throw off his timing. Nyx took advantage instantly. She dodged the right-hand attacker, let him overextend, and kicked him into the hunter Darien had struck. Both vampires went down in a tangle of limbs and curses. Ravix's eyes snapped up to Darien's position. Ah, the human, how resourceful. He gestured, and the fifth hunter, a female vampire with blade-white hair, blurred into motion, heading straight for the cliff face where Darien stood, coming for him with lethal speed. Darien didn't hesitate. He'd known this would happen the moment he revealed himself. He ran along the cliff edge, searching for anything he could use. His sword was out, but he had no illusions. One strike from that vampire would end him. Below, Nyx screamed through the bond, "I'm coming." But she was engaged with 3 hunters now. Couldn't break away without leaving herself open. She was fighting magnificently, but even she had limits. The blade-haired vampire reached the cliff, started climbing. She moved like a spider, impossibly fast, clawed hands, finding purchase in sheer stone. She'd reach him in seconds. Darien made a split-second decision. Stopped running, turned and waited at the cliff edge with his sword ready. "You're either brave or stupid," the hunter said, still climbing. "I'll enjoy discovering which third option," Darien replied and kicked a section of unstable cliff edge. The rock gave way. He'd noticed it was cracked during his climb. Up. The hunter lunged upward just as her handhold crumbled. She tried to shift to find new purchase, but gravity had her. She fell, hit the ground hard, and Darien heard something crack. Not dead, vampires could survive that, but hurt. Temporarily out of the fight. 2 down, 3 to go. Ravix had noticed. His expression shifted from confidence to something colder. Calculating. "You've trained him," he said to Nyx. "In 4 days, you've made him think tactically. That's unexpected. He didn't need training." Nyx blocked. Another strike, countered with a punch that would have shattered human ribs. He's clever all on his own. Turns out, treating people as allies instead of tools makes them better partners. You should take notes. The battle intensified. Ravix was pushing harder now, and the 2 hunters flanking Nyx had recovered. They attacked in coordination, forcing her to defend from multiple angles simultaneously. She was holding her own, but barely. Every block caused her. Every dodge left her slightly more off balance. Darien searched for another opening, another way to help. He was too high to jump down safely, too exposed to climb down without being targeted. But there, a dead tree half fallen, leaning precariously at the cliff edge. If he could topple it, he put his shoulder to the trunk and pushed. The tree resisted, roots still partially embedded. He pushed harder, felt the bond with Nyx, allowing him to draw on her strength somehow. The tree shifted, cracked, and finally fell, crashing down into the clearing below, right where one of the hunters was standing. The vampire saw it. Coming, tried to dodge, but was mid-attack against Nyx, and couldn't change direction fast enough. The tree caught him across the shoulders, drove him to the ground, pinned him under its weight. 3 down. Only Ravix and one other. Hunter remained standing. The odds had shifted. Enough. Ravix's voice cracked like a whip. He disengaged from Nyx, stepped back, and his expression was pure cold fury. You've made your point. You're not the same frightened girl we threw in that cell. You found strength, found an ally, found resistance. His eyes found Darien still on the cliff. But you're still just delaying the inevitable. Is that what you tell yourself? Nyx was breathing hard but still standing strong. That inevitability will solve the problem of me. I've been inevitable for 43 years. Ravix, you're no closer to catching me now than you were the first time because you've been running, hiding, moving constantly to avoid confrontation. Ravix sheathed his sword slowly, deliberately, but you can't run anymore. You've bonded with a human. That bond requires proximity, requires you to stay close to keep him alive. You've chained yourself more effectively than our silver ever did. Darien felt ice through the bond, felt Nyx's realization that Ravix was right. Their bond, their strength was also a limitation. And more than that, Ravix continued. You've involved him in matters he can't possibly understand. The ritual, the portal, the darkness. Waiting on the other side. He looked directly at Darien. Did she tell you? Did she explain that her blood is the only thing standing between this world and annihilation? That the court's cruelty, their desperation to capture her, comes from genuine need? He knows enough, Nick said. But her voice was uncertain. Does he? Ravix smiled coldly. Does he know that the portal is already starting to open? That cracks are forming, that darkness is leaking through in small ways, that villages are disappearing, that corruption is spreading through vampire and human populations alike. He took a step forward. The courts aren't trying to open the portal for conquest. They're trying to seal it properly. And only your blood, given in the correct ritual, can do that. Silence fell across the clearing. Darien felt Nyx's confusion, her horror through the bond. She hadn't known, had spent 43 years running from what she thought was a power grab, only to discover maybe that she'd been running from salvation. You're lying, she said. But it sounded hollow. Am I? Why would I lie when the truth serves me better? Ravix spread his hands. Come willingly, let us complete the ritual properly. Save both our species from the darkness. Die a hero instead of a fugitive. And if I refuse, then we take you by force and your human dies badly. His eyes found Darien again. I'll make sure of it. Personally, Nyx's rage flooded through the bond, and Darien felt her preparing to attack. To end this with violence rather than surrender. But he also felt her doubt. Her fear that maybe Ravix was telling the truth. Nyx, Darien said through the bond, not out loud. Don't. He's threatening you. I know, but if there's even a chance he's telling the truth about the portal, we need to know more before we decide. You're asking me to surrender. I'm asking you to think, to question. We've been running on instinct and fear. Maybe it's time to get answers. He felt her wrestling with the decision. Then slowly she lowered her hands. Not in surrender, in cessation of immediate violence. I'll listen, she said to Ravix. But if you try to force the ritual without explanation, I'll kill everyone in that chamber and bring the mountain down on top of us. Understood. Ravix studied her, then nodded. Understood. You have my word. Explanation before action. Your word is worth less than dirt. True, but it's all I'm offering. He gestured to his hunters, the ones still conscious. Stand down. We're escorting our guests to the Vale. Peacefully. The hunters obeyed, though they kept their weapons drawn. One moved to help their pinned companion out from under the tree. Another tended to the cliff fall victim. Darien climbed down carefully, aware of eyes tracking his every movement. When he reached the ground, Nyx was instantly beside him, positioning herself between him and the bloodhounds. If they touch you, she whispered, I know you'll paint the forest red. He touched her hand briefly. But let's see what truth looks like before we commit to more violence. Ravix was watching them with an expression Darien couldn't read. Not quite respect, not quite pity. Something in between. The bond is strong between you, he observed. Unexpected. Bonds usually take years to develop such depth. You've managed it in days. He tilted his head. Perhaps that's what makes you different, little bird. You don't just connect, you commit completely. It's your greatest strength and your fatal flaw. Nyx didn't answer. Just kept her eyes on him while staying close to Darien. The Vale is 2 days. Journey. Ravix continued. We travel together. You try nothing. I try nothing. At the Vale, you'll meet someone who can explain better than I can. Someone who's been waiting a very long time to speak with you. Who? You'll see. He started walking north into deeper forest. His hunters fell into formation around them. Not overtly hostile, but clearly guards. Come. Dawn is approaching and we have distance to cover. Nyx looked at Darien. Through the bond, he felt her question. Trust this. And his answer, no, but we learn more by going than by fighting. So they walked into the forest toward the Crimson Vale, toward answers and rituals, and ancient darkness waiting to be revealed. Behind them, the shrine's protective symbols dimmed as they left. Its sanctuary. And ahead, something stirred in the depths of the Vale. Something that had felt Nyx's approach, that had sensed the blood bond and recognized its significance. The first Huntress was waking from her millennial-long wait. Everything was about to change. They walked through forests that grew progressively stranger. The trees shifted from oak and pine to species Darien had never seen. Twisted black trunks with crimson leaves that rustled in windless air. The ground underfoot became darker, richer, as if blood had soaked into the soil centuries ago and never fully dried. And the light, even at midday the sun seemed dimmed here, filtered through mist that clung to everything. This was old vampire territory, a place where the boundary between natural and supernatural had worn thin. Nyx walked beside him, silent but alert. Through their bond, he felt her constant vigilance, her awareness of every hunter surrounding them. She was cooperating. Yes, but hadn't let her guard down for a moment. If this became a trap, she'd be ready. Ravix led from the front, occasionally glancing back to ensure they followed. He seemed less antagonistic now, more contemplative. Whatever awaited them at the Vale, even. He appeared unsettled by it. Tell me about the first Huntress, Darien said quietly, breaking hours of silence. Ravix paused mid-step, turned slowly. Where did you hear that name? The shrine. There were carvings, old stories. Something about a progenitor who started the bloodlines. It was partially true he had seen carvings, but mostly he was fishing, trying to gather information. The first Huntress is legend, one of the other hunters said. A vampire named Kess, shorter than the others, but radiating dangerous competence. Stories we tell fledglings to teach them about honor and purpose. She's not real. But Ravix was staring at Nyx and his expression was strange. You feel it too, don't you? The pull toward the Vale. It's not just territory. It's calling. You specifically. Nyx didn't answer, but through the bond, Darien felt her tension spike. She did feel something. A pull she'd been trying to ignore, growing stronger with each mile closer to the ancient city. The first Huntress was real, Ravik said quietly. Arendra of the Crimson Dawn. She led our people through the portal from the ancestral realm, sealed it behind us to protect both worlds. Then, she entered stasis, waiting for he stopped. Waiting for what? Darien pressed. For the one who could complete what she started, the one with blood, pure enough to properly seal or open the portal as needed. His eyes never left. Nyx. Waiting for you. Nyx laughed, but it sounded brittle. That's ridiculous. I'm not special. I'm just one of hundreds from the original bloodlines. No, you're the last of the direct line. The only living descendant of Arendra herself. Ravik's voice carried certainty. Why do you think the courts have hunted you so desperately? Why? They've spent 4 decades trying to capture you instead of simply killing you like they have every other dent. You're saying I'm Nyx stopped walking. That's not possible. The direct line died out centuries ago. It was believed to have died out. But your mother hid you among lesser bloodlines, disguised your heritage. She died protecting that secret. Ravix approached slowly, hands open and non-threatening. You spent your life thinking you were defective, wrong, broken. But you were never any of those things. You were hidden, protected, kept safe until the time came when you'd be needed. Darien watched Nyx process this, felt through the bond how it shattered and rebuilt her entire understanding of herself. She thought she was running from becoming a tool. Instead, she'd been running from a legacy she'd never known she carried. If this is true, she said slowly, if I am her descendant, what does that change? Everything. Rake gestured. Northward. The portal is failing. Not because anyone is trying to open it, but because Arendra's original seal was always meant to be temporary. She knew she couldn't hold it forever. New one. Day her bloodline would need to renew the binding. That day is coming soon. And only you can perform the ritual properly by dying, by choosing. He said it carefully. Indra's seal required willing sacrifice. Her own stasis for millennia. Your renewal requires the same. Willing participation in a ritual that will either kill you and seal the portal for another age or transform you into something else. The guardian. The watcher between worlds. That's quite a sales pitch, Darien interjected. Surrender to ritual, maybe die, maybe become something inhuman. Why should she believe any of this? Because the alternative is watching both our species consumed by the darkness leaking through. Because villages are already disappearing. Because corruption is spreading through the vampire courts. You've seen it. Nyx. The cruelty, the madness. That's not natural vampire behavior. That's darkness from the other side influencing weak minds. Nyx was quiet for a long moment. Then take us to the veil. Let me hear this from Indra herself. If she's real, if she's waiting, I'll listen. But I make no promises beyond that. Ravik nodded, relief visible in his expression. That's all I ask. They continued walking. The second day brought them to the edge of the Crimson Veil, and Darien's breath caught at the sight. The city was magnificent and terrible, carved into mountainside cliffs that rose impossibly high. Towers of black stone pierced the perpetual red mist like broken teeth. Bridges spanned impossible distances, held up by architecture that defied physics. And everywhere symbols glowed. Faintly, wards and seals and magic made manifest. My God, Darien whispered. Your gods have no power here, Kes said. But there was no mockery in it. This place predates any religion humans remember. It predates your civilization. They entered through gates that opened at Ravik's approach, responding to his bloodline, even after centuries of abandonment. Inside, the city was eerily preserved. Furniture still in place, tapestries hanging on walls, personal belongings left as if their owners had simply stepped out and never returned. What happened here? Nyx asked, and her voice carried a note Darien had never heard before. Grief. This was her ancestral home, and it was a tomb. Exodus. Ravik replied. When Arindra sealed the portal, she ordered everyone to leave. Said the city needed to sleep to wait for the day it would be needed again. He led them deeper downstairs that seemed to descend forever. She stayed behind alone waiting. They reached a chamber deep beneath the city, vast circular carved from single piece of crystalline stone, and in the center on a throne of black obsidian sat a figure. She was magnificent, tall, even seated with features that were sharp and beautiful and utterly inhuman. Her skin was paper white, her hair silver black, her eyes closed as if in sleep. She wore armor that looked grown rather than forged organic metal, that pulsed faintly with crimson light. And around her, symbols spiraled in the air, visible magic holding her in stasis. Indra, the first Huntress. As they approached, her eyes opened. They were entirely silver. No pupils, no iris, just luminous metallic silver that seemed to see through flesh and bone to soul beneath. Descendant, she said, and her voice resonated through the chamber like a bell. You've come. Finally, you've come. Nyx stopped and Darien felt through their bond that she was overwhelmed. This was too much. Ancient legend made real. Claims of destiny. The weight of millennia settling on her shoulders. Don't. Nyx started. I can't. Breathe. Child. Arendra's voice gentled. I know. This is frightening. Overwhelming. You've spent your life running from purpose only to discover purpose was running toward you all along. She rose from her throne and the stasis symbol shattered. She'd been waiting for this moment, Darien realized, holding herself in sleep until her descendant arrived. Indrenra approached Nyx slowly, reverently. When she touched Nyx's face, Darien saw tears form in the ancient vampire's eyes. You look like her. Indra whispered. Your mother. My daughter's daughter's daughter. Across so many generations I've lost count. But I see her in your eyes. Her strength. Her refusal to accept cruelty as necessary. She smiled sadly. She died protecting you. Did you know? Yes. Nyx's voice broke. They told me she was defective too. That weakness ran in our line. Not weakness. Love. The willingness to put another's life above law and expectation. Indra stepped back. That's what I need you to understand before we speak of rituals and sacrifice. What I'm asking, what I've been waiting to ask, isn't about duty or destiny. It's about choice. She gestured and the chamber's walls changed. Images appeared showing other worlds, other timelines. Darien saw the portal from the outside. A tear in reality leaking darkness like infected blood. Saw villages consumed. People transformed into things that weren't quite alive or dead. Saw the corruption spreading slowly but inevitably. The seal is failing. Arindra said, I hold it still, but my power is finite. When I fade completely, months, maybe a year, the portal will tear open fully. And the darkness that drove us from our homeland will consume this world as it consumed ours. So I die to stop it. Nyx said it flatly. Perhaps. Or perhaps something else. Arendra's silver eyes found Darien. You've bonded with a human. That's unexpected. Unprecedented. Bonds between species were rare even in ancient times and never this strong this quickly. What does our bond have to do with the ritual? Everything, potentially. Indrenra began to pace, and Darien sensed she was working through possibilities even as she spoke. The original seal required my solitary sacrifice. But perhaps a new approach, 2 souls. Bonded, 1 vampire, 1 human could create a different kind of seal. 1. That doesn't require death, but transformation. Transformation into what? Guardians. Both of you. Changed by the ritual, made into something new. No longer quite vampire, no longer quite human, but something capable of walking both worlds and holding the boundary between them. Hope sparked in Darien's chest. A way forward that didn't end with Nyx's death. But he saw the doubt in her. Expression felt it through their bond. There's a cost, Nyx said. There's always a cost with magic this powerful. Yes. Indra met her eyes. You'd be bound. To the veil, to the portal, unable to leave for long periods. You'd age slowly, live for centuries, watching generations pass while you remain. And the bond between you, she looked at Darien, would become your chain and your salvation. If one of you died, the seal would fail. You'd be dependent on each other's survival forever. Forever. Darien repeated the word was vast, terrifying, and somehow not terrifying enough. That's what you're offering. Eternal life bound to one person, one place, one purpose. I'm offering choice, Bindra said firmly. The choice my bloodline was denied. The choice I couldn't give my people when I sealed the portal alone. She turned to Nyx. You can refuse. You can walk away, but understand what that refusal means. The courts will hunt you until you're captured. The ritual will be forced, done incorrectly, and you'll die anyway, probably taking your human with you. And the portal will fail eventually, consuming both our species. Or Nyx asked, or you choose. You both choose. You undergo the ritual willingly together and become the guardians the portal needs. You live but differently. You protect both worlds but from a cage of responsibility more binding than any chains. Silence filled the chamber. Darien looked at Nyx, found her already looking at him. Through their bond, emotions flooded. Fear, hope, love, terror, determination. Neither of them had expected their story to lead here. To a choice that would define centuries instead of years. Need time, Nyx said finally. Time to think, to decide. You have hours, Ravik interjected. The courts know we've brought her here. They'll arrive by tomorrow, ready to force the ritual their way. Whatever decision you make, it needs to be now. Nyx looked at Arindra. If I refuse, if we both refuse, then I'll hold the seal. As long as I can. Buy you time to run, to hide. You'll have months, maybe a year, but eventually the darkness will come. The ancient vampire's expression was infinitely sad. I've held this burden for millennia. Child, I'm so very tired, but I'll keep fighting if you need me to. That's what family does. The word family broke something in Nyx. She'd spent her life alone, convinced. She had no one. Now faced with an ancestor who'd waited eons for her, offering not just duty but connection. She couldn't maintain her walls. I need to talk to Darien, she said. Alone. Please nodded the chamber above. Take what time you need. They climbed stairs in silence, neither speaking until they reached an upper room with windows, overlooking the veil. Moonlight painted everything silver. And, in the distance, Darien could see the massive towers that probably housed the portal itself. Tell me what you're thinking, Nyx said. Quietly. I'm thinking this is insane. That we've known each other less than a week. That making decisions about eternity based on days of acquaintance is possibly the worst idea in history. He turned to face her. I'm also thinking I don't care because what we have this bond, this connection, it feels more real than anything I've experienced in my entire life. We'd be trapped bound to this place forever. We'd be together alive, making a difference. He took her hands. Isn't that better than running? Better than dying in some cell or ritual chamber. Better than spending our lives looking over our shoulders. But forever, Darian, that's not a lifespan. That's eternity. What if you regret it? What if you wake up in 100 years and realize you hate me? Hate what we become. What if I don't? He pulled her closer. What if this is exactly what I'm supposed to do? Save the world with the woman I... He stopped, but the words hung there unspoken, but undeniable. Say it, Nyx whispered. Please say it. I love you. The confession came out raw, honest, terrified. I don't know how it happened so fast. Don't know if it's the bond or fate or just terrible timing. But I love you, Nyx, and I'd rather spend eternity bound to you and this place than spend a single day knowing I let you die. She was crying silver tears that caught moonlight like mercury. I love you too. I've been trying to protect us both from this, but I do. I love you so much. It terrifies me. They kissed then properly for the first time since that desperate moment in the shrine. And through the bond emotions cascaded. Love and fear and hope and determination all tangled together until neither could tell where their feelings ended and the others began. When they pulled apart, the decision was made. They both felt it. We do it, Nyx said. Together we become the guardians. Together, Darian agreed. Whatever comes next, we face it together. They returned to the lower chamber hand in hand. Arendra looked up and understanding crossed her ancient features. You've chosen, she said. We have. Nyx's voice was steady now. Show us what needs to be done. Indra smiled, a real smile, full of relief and pride in something that looked like love. Then let's save the world, descendant. One last time. Outside, the courts were gathering. Inside, a ritual older than civilization was being prepared. And in the depths beneath the veil, the portal sensed its guardians approaching and began to stir with recognition. Everything was converging on this moment. The question was whether they'd survive it. Morning came to the crimson veil, though it was hard to tell. The perpetual red mist filtered sunlight into something dim and uncertain. Darian stood at a window, watching the ancient city wake from its long sleep, and marveled that he was here, that he'd gone from condemned prisoner to volunteer guardian in less than a week. Behind him, Nyx slept. They'd found chambers prepared by Indra, rooms that had waited centuries for their arrival. The bed was ancient but surprisingly comfortable, and they'd collapsed into it after hours of discussion about the ritual, exhausted by decisions that felt too large for their small lives. But Nyx had nightmares. He'd felt them through the bond, visions of the ritual going wrong, of him dying in agony while she watched helplessly. He'd held her through the worst of it, whispered reassurances he hoped were true, and eventually she'd settled into deeper sleep. Now he stood, unable to rest himself. Too much was happening. Too fast. You should sleep. Indra's voice came from the doorway. She'd approached silently, that predatory grace common to all vampires, but refined to perfection in her. The ritual is tonight. You'll need your strength. Can't. Darian didn't turn from the window. Too many questions. Too much. I don't understand. Such as why you believe too. People who barely know each other can hold a seal that took you millennia to maintain. Such as what happens if we fail. Such as he stopped. Such as whether you're telling us the whole truth or just the parts that'll convince us to cooperate. Silence. Fenra laughed. A sound like breaking crystal. You're clever. I see why she bonded with you. That's not an answer. No, it's not. She crossed to stand beside him, looking out at the city she built and abandoned. The truth is complicated. Yes, the seal is failing. Yes, only her blood can renew it properly. Yes, the ritual could kill you both if performed incorrectly. And what aren't you saying? Indra met his eyes, and her silver gaze was ancient. I'm not saying that even if the ritual succeeds, even if you both survive and become guardians, you'll be changed in ways I can't fully predict. The original seal used only vampire magic, introducing human elements across. Species bond means we're working with unknown variables. You could emerge as guardians, or you could emerge as something new entirely. Something neither of our species understands. I settled in Darian's stomach. You're saying we might become monsters. I'm saying you'll definitely become other. Whether that other is monstrous depends on who you are beneath the transformation. She touched his shoulder gently. But I believe I have to believe that two souls, who chose each other despite every reason not to, who formed a bond this strong this quickly, possessed the strength to remain themselves through any change. That's faith, not fact. Yes. But sometimes faith is all we have. She turned from the window. I won't force you. Neither of you. If you choose to walk away, I'll hold the seal as long as possible and give you time to run. But understand, I'm 3,000 years old, Darian. I'm so tired. And the thought of finally resting, knowing my descendant carries on the guardian's duty, knowing the seal is in capable hands. Her voice cracked slightly. It's all I've wanted for longer than your civilization has existed. Darian absorbed this. The weight of millennia, the burden of solitary duty, all concentrated in this ancient being who'd sacrificed everything for species that had largely forgotten she existed. If we do this, he said quietly, if we succeed, what happens to you? I fade. Return to the elements. Sleep the final sleep. She smiled peacefully. And meet my daughters again. All those generations between me and Nyx. It's a good death, a chosen ending. Then we'll make sure it happens. Darian held out his hand for you, for Nyx. For both our peoples. We'll become whatever the ritual makes us, and we'll hold that seal until we're as ancient as you are now. Indra took his hand, and her grip was firm. Thank you for choosing purpose over safety, for loving her enough to risk transformation. You're everything I hoped her bondmate would be. They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Then Nyx stirred. Behind them, waking. I heard, she said, sitting up. Everything. Through the bond. She looked at Darian. You're sure? Truly sure? As sure as I can be about something impossible and terrifying and completely insane. He crossed to her, sat on the bed's edge. But yes, I'm sure. She pulled him down, kissed him deeply, and through the bond, he felt her love and fear and desperate hope that they'd made the right choice. Then we prepare, she said when they parted. Show me what needs to be done, Indra. Show us how to save the world. The day passed in preparation. Indra explained the ritual in detail. Symbols that needed to be drawn, words that had to be spoken, the timing that required precise coordination with celestial movements above. She showed them the ritual chamber deep beneath the throne room where the portal itself was housed. Darian had expected something dramatic, a swirling vortex or glowing doorway. Instead, the portal was subtle, a section of wall where reality seemed slightly wrong, where shadows moved independently and whispers echoed from nowhere. It looked harmless, but standing near it, he felt wrongness radiating like heat from a forge. The darkness is close, Nyx whispered, staring at the portal. I can feel it, trying to push through. It's been trying for 3,000 years, Ira confirmed. My seal holds but barely. Tonight we renew the binding. Or tonight it fails. Completely. They spent hours going over every detail. Darien learned the words. He'd need to speak ancient phrases in a language no human had spoken in millennia. Nick studied the symbols, committing them to memory. Both of them practiced the choreography of the ritual. Where to stand, when to move. How to channel their combined life force through the bond into the seal. It was complex, dangerous. One mistake could kill them, or worse, could weaken the seal enough for the darkness to break through entirely. By evening, they were as prepared as they'd ever be. The courts arrived as predicted. Darien heard their approach. Hundreds of vampires descending on the veil surrounding it, demanding entrance. Ravix went to speak with them to buy time for the ritual. They'll try to stop us, Nick said, helping Darien into ceremonial robes Arindra had prepared. They want the ritual done their way. My death, my blood spilled in sacrifice. This way with you, with choice, it disrupts their plans. Their plans involve genocide and dark portals. I'm comfortable disrupting them. She laughed despite the tension. I love your perspective. I love you. He said it easily now. No hesitation. If tonight was their last night as who they currently were, he wanted every moment filled with truth. I love you too. She finished adjusting his robes, then pulled him close. Whatever happens down there, whatever we become, promise me we stay us. That we don't lose who we are in whatever transformation comes. Promise we stay us, you and me together. They sealed it with a kiss. Then Indra appeared in the doorway. It's time. They descended to the ritual chamber. The space had been transformed. Symbols glowed on every surface drawn in. Compound Arindra had mixed from rare ingredients. Candles burned with flames, the color of blood. And at the chamber center before the portal itself, a circle waited, large enough for two people standing close, inscribed with runes that hurt to look at directly. This was where they'd make their stand. The courts are at the gates, Indra said, urgency in her voice. Ravik can hold them for an hour, maybe less. We must begin. Darien and Nyx took their positions in the circle facing each other. Their hands joined the bond, marks on their palms pressing together. Immediately, connection flared, stronger than ever, their essences already beginning to merge in preparation for what was coming. Indra stood outside the circle, speaking words of power that resonated through stone and flesh. The portal began to pulse, responding to ancient magic calling it awake. And on the far side, through that thin place, where reality grew uncertain, Darien saw it. The darkness. Not absence of light, but presence of something that consumed light. It pressed against the portal like water, against a dam, seeking any crack, any weakness. And as the ritual began, as power started to flow, it sensed an opportunity. It pushed. The seal shuddered. Arendra gasped, stumbled. It's fighting us. Fighting harder than expected. Can you hold it? Nyx called I. Arendra's face was strained. I don't know. It's so strong now. So hungry. Above, they heard sounds of battle. The courts had broken through, were fighting their way down. Ravix and his hunters were trying to delay them, but there were too many. They'd be here in minutes. We don't have time for the full ritual, Darien realized. We need to improvise. Improvise with ancient magic. Nick stared at him. That's suicide. So is stopping now. He squeezed her hands. Trust me. Trust us. Trust the bond. She searched his eyes, then nodded. Always. I always trust us. They began to speak the ritual words together, not in the prescribed order but following instinct, following what felt right through the bond connecting them, and to Darien's shock it worked. Power began to flow not from them individually, but from the space between them, from the bond itself. The portal pulsed in response. The darkness pushed harder and the Sealindra's ancient failing seal began to crack. No. Arindra tried to reinforce it, but she was too weak, too drained. For millennia of solitary burden, the seal shattered. For one terrible moment, the portal stood open and undefended. The darkness surged forward, reaching through, grasping for purchase in their world. Darien felt it touch his mind. Cold, ancient, utterly alien. It wanted to consume, to convert, to spread like infection through everything it touched. Then Nyx screamed, not in pain, in defiance. She pulled power from deep within herself, from bloodline and heritage, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. Crimson light erupted from her, met the darkness, held it back through force of will alone. But it wasn't enough. The darkness was too strong, too vast. She was burning herself out. And when she failed, nothing would stand between the darkness and their world. Darien made a choice. He pulled from the bond, pulled from his own life force, his essence, everything that made him human, and he poured it into Nyx, into the seal, into the space where her power met the darkness. The effect was immediate. His strength joined with hers. Human and vampire merged through the bond, created something neither species could achieve. Alone. Light erupted, not crimson, not gold, but something new. Something that made the darkness recoil. They pushed together, spoke words in perfect synchronization, and the portal began to close. The darkness fought, thrashed against their combined will. But they held together. They held. The portal sealed. Not with Arindra's magic this time, but with theirs. With the power born from their bond, from their choice to stand together against impossible odds. The new seal settled into place, and it was different from the old one. Stronger, fed by two sources instead of one. They collapsed. The circle's symbols dimmed. The ritual chamber fell quiet. And when Darien opened his eyes, he felt different, stronger, faster. His senses extended beyond normal human range. But he wasn't vampire. He could still feel his heartbeat, still breathed air. He was changed, yes, but not transformed into something else entirely. He looked at Nyx. She was conscious, staring at her hands in wonder. "I can feel daylight," she whispered. "The sun is above and I can feel it. Not as pain but as presence." She met his eyes. "What? Are we guardians?" Arendra's voice came weakly. She was kneeling outside the circle, looking ancient and fragile. But she was smiling. "You did it. You made a new seal. Stronger than mine. Better than mine. But at what cost?" Darien stood slowly, testing his new body. Everything felt more alive, more present, more real, less than I feared, more than you expected. Indra gestured at them both. "You're changed but not lost. Human and vampire merged into something new. You'll age slowly, live for centuries. And the seal," she touched the portal, "is tied to your bond now. As long as you remain together, it holds. If you're separated or one of you dies, it fails." Nyx finished. "So we stay together forever." "Forever." Darien agreed. The chamber doors burst open. Vampire court members flooded in, weapons drawn, ready to force their version of the ritual. Then they stopped, staring at the sealed portal, at Arindra's peaceful expression, at Darien and Nyx standing in the circle, clearly changed, clearly powerful, clearly not the easy targets they'd expected. "It's done," Ravik said. From behind the court members. He was wounded, but alive, his hunters with him. The ritual succeeded. The seal is renewed by a human and a defective. One of the court lords stepped forward. "That's not. It's exactly how it was meant to be," Arindra interrupted. Her voice carried authority that made even the lords hesitate. "I created the first seal alone. It lasted 3,000 years. These two created it together. It will last 10 times that, maybe more." She looked at the court lords. "You wanted salvation. You have it. Now leave. Let the guardians do their work in peace." The lords hesitated, looked at each other, at the sealed portal, at the two figures who'd somehow achieved what should have been impossible. Finally, they bowed and retreated. The chamber emptied until only Nyx and Darian remained. "Thank you," Arindra said softly, "for carrying on, for choosing this burden." She was fading visibly now, her purpose complete. "The veil is yours. The portal is yours. Guard them well, my children." She closed her eyes, and between one breath and the next, she was gone. Not dead, simply ceased. Returned to the elements that had shaped her millennia ago. Nyx cried. Silent tears. Darian held her. "We're alone now," she whispered. "We're together. Now," he corrected. "And we have a city to rebuild, a seal to guard, and about 1,000 years to figure out what it means to be guardians." She laughed through her tears. "Only 1,000. Let's start there and see how we feel." They stood in a ritual chamber. Two beings who were no longer quite what they'd been. Human, vampire, guardian in between. But together, and that was enough, they emerged from the depths to find the crimson veil transformed by morning light. Real morning light, not filtered through mist, not dimmed by ancient magic, but actual sunlight breaking through clouds for the first time in centuries. The transformation of the seal had affected more than just the portal. It had lifted some fundamental darkness that had clung to the veil since Arindra's first sealing. Nyx stopped at the threshold of the throne room, staring at sunbeams slanting through high windows. Darian felt through their bond what this meant to her. She'd spent centuries unable to tolerate direct sunlight. It had been a prison as real as any cell. And now she walked forward into the light. It touched her skin, and she didn't burn, didn't flinch, just stood there with tears streaming down her face, feeling warmth she thought forever lost to her. "I can feel it," she whispered. "Really feel it. Not just as something to avoid, but as something beautiful." She turned to Darian, radiant. "Is this what it's like for you? This warmth? Every day of my human life?" He joined her in the sunlight, took her hand. "Welcome to mornings." She laughed pure joy, unrestrained. Then she pulled him close and kissed him in the daylight in the throne room of her ancestors in the city that was now their responsibility and their home. When they parted, Ravix was standing in the doorway watching. He looked exhausted, battered from the fighting above, but there was something like respect in his expression. "The courts have withdrawn," he reported. "They're satisfied isn't the right word, but accepting. You've done what they thought impossible, and they're pragmatic enough to recognize success when they see it." He approached slowly. "The question is, what happens now? You're guardians of the portal." "Yes, but what does that mean practically?" "It means we stay here," Nick said. "It means we stay here," Nick said, her voice steady with newfound purpose. "The veil becomes what it was always meant to be, a bridge between worlds, a sanctuary." "For whom?" Ravix asked. "For anyone who needs it." Darian stepped forward, feeling the weight of his new role settling onto his shoulders. "Humans Fleeing vampire tyranny. Vampires seeking redemption from the court's corruption. Anyone caught between worlds like we are. Ravik studied them both for a long moment. Then slowly he knelt. Then you have my service, guardians. I've spent 40 years hunting you, Nyx. Let me spend the next 40 helping you build something better. Nyx looked shocked. You're serious. The courts are changing. The seal's renewal lifted corruption that had been leaking through for decades. Vampires are waking up as if from nightmares, horrified by what they've done. He met her eyes. I remember now. What we were before. The darkness influenced us. The honor we abandoned. The balance we broke. If you're offering a chance to reclaim that, I'll take it. You're not the only one, Kess said from the doorway. The blade-haired Huntress entered, limping slightly from battle. Wounds. Half the bloodhounds are outside. They felt the change when they seal renewed. They want to serve the new order. More figures appeared. Vampires. From the courts looking uncertain but hopeful. Humans who'd been prisoners or servants freed in the chaos. They gathered in the throne room drawn by something they couldn't name. The pull of a place that promised safety, balance, purpose. Darien looked at Nyx. Through their bond, he felt her overwhelm her. Disbelief that this was happening. She'd spent so long running, alone, hunted. Now she stood as a leader, as a symbol of something new. We accept your service, Nyx said formally, addressing the gathered crowd. But understand this. Won't be easy. The Veil has been abandoned for centuries. Rebuilding will take time, effort, sacrifice, and we'll have enemies. Courts who resist change. Humans who hate all vampires. Forces on both sides who want the old ways preserved. Let them come, a voice called from the crowd. Others echoed agreement. Then we begin. Nyx descended from the throne platform, moving among the gathered people. Ravik's organized security. We need patrols, defenses, early warning systems. Kess inventory the city. Find what's salvageable, what needs repair. The rest of you, she looked around. Find your strengths. Builder, healer, teacher, warrior. The Veil needs all of you. They dispersed with purpose. Energy filling the ancient halls. Darien watched in amazement as the dead city began to wake. Vampires and humans working side by side, tentative but willing. It was fragile, this new peace. But it was real. You're good at this, he said to Nyx when they were alone again. At what? Leading, inspiring, making people believe in something better. He pulled her close. You were born for this. Not as a sacrifice, but as a builder. She leaned into him, exhausted but content. We were born for this. Couldn't do it without you. The bond, the seal, all of it requires both of us. Then it's a good thing I'm not going anywhere. They stood together in the sunlit throne room, watching their new people begin the work of transformation. And through the bond, they felt each other's hope, fear, love, and determination intertwining until neither could tell where one ended and the other began. 3 months later, the Crimson Veil had transformed from tomb to thriving sanctuary. Darien stood on a balcony overlooking the main courtyard, watching the daily bustle below. Vampire craftsmen repaired ancient architecture alongside human engineers who brought new techniques. Children, both human and young vampires, played in gardens that had been coaxed back to life. Market stalls offered goods traded between the Veil and the outside world. It was imperfect. There were tensions, misunderstandings, old hatreds that surfaced and had to be addressed. But it was working. You're brooding again, Nyx said, joining him. She'd changed in a month since the ritual. More confident, more at peace with herself. Her hair was longer now, often braided with small tokens given by Vale residents. She wore practical clothing instead of armor, though she could still move like a weapon when needed. Not brooding, observing. He slipped an arm around her waist, marveling, actually, that we pulled this off. We're still pulling it off every day. She leaned against him. The Northern Court sent another envoy. They want to discuss terms of cooperation. Translation: they want to know if we're a threat. Probably, but they're talking instead of attacking. That's progress. She tilted her head up to look at him. How are you feeling? The bond, the changes, any regrets? Darien considered. His body had stabilized into something between human and vampire. He was stronger, faster, healed quickly from injuries. His senses were enhanced, but not overwhelming. He aged slowly. They'd calculated he might live several centuries before showing significant signs of time passing. No regrets, he said honestly. Some days are hard. I miss purely human things. The simplicity of not being tied to a magical seal, not having every vampire court watching our every move. But then I remember the alternative was dying in a cell, and this seems vastly preferable. Even being bound to me. Forever, especially being bound to you forever. He kissed her forehead. You're stuck with me, Huntress, for the next few centuries at minimum. She smiled. That rare full smile she reserved only for him. I can live with that. A commotion below drew their attention. A group was arriving at the main gates. Refugees by the look of them. Ragged, frightened, pursued. The Vale guards were already moving to help, but Darien and Nyx descended anyway. This was their responsibility. The refugees were a mixed group. 7 humans, 3 vampires, all showing signs of recent violence. The lead human, a woman with fierce eyes and a protective stance around the others, stepped forward when she saw Nyx. You're the guardian, she said. The one they say protects both kinds. I am. This is Guardian Darien. Nyx gestured to him. You're safe here. What happened? Rogue vampires. A pack that didn't get the message about the seal renewing. They're still corrupted, still hunting. The woman's voice shook. They destroyed our village. These 3, she indicated the vampires, tried to help us escape. We've been running for days. One of the vampire refugees, barely more than a boy, spoke up. The rogues are following us. They'll attack here if they think you're harboring their prey. Let them come. Ravix had appeared, his hunter instincts alerted by the mention of threats. We'll show them what happens to those who threaten the Vale. No killing if we can avoid it, Nyx said firmly. They're corrupted, not evil. The darkness twisted them. If we can capture them, maybe we can heal them like the seal healed the corpse. That's a risk, Ravix warned. Everything worth doing is Nyx. Turned to the refugees. You'll be protected. Guards, take them to the sanctuary wing. Food, shelter, healing, whatever they need. As the refugees were led away, the woman looked back. Thank you. We'd heard stories, but I didn't believe. She stopped, emotion choking her words. Didn't believe anywhere was really safe for people like us. People caught. Between now you know, Darien said gently. The Vale is real and you're home. The rogue vampires attacked at dusk. They came in a frenzy, 12 of them. Eyes black with corruption, minds twisted by the darkness that had leaked through before the seal was renewed. They expected easy prey. They found something else entirely. The Vale's defenders met them at the outer walls, not with overwhelming violence, but with coordinated precision. Nets woven with silver threads to capture rather than kill. Restraint techniques Nyx had taught her guards. The goal wasn't slaughter. was salvation. But the rogues fought with desperate madness. 3 guards went down before Nyx arrived, moving with the supernatural speed she'd once used only for hunting. She disabled 2 rogues before they registered her presence, struck pressure points that would render them unconscious without permanent damage. Darien fought alongside Ravik using his enhanced human capabilities to outthink rather than overpower. He led rogues into traps, separated them from their pack, created openings for others to exploit. It was messy, chaotic, dangerous, but it worked. Within an hour, all 12 rogues were captured, bound, and sedated. No deaths on either side. The veil had held. Take them to the purification chambers, Nyx ordered, breathing hard. Well, use the same techniques that healed the courts. It'll take time, but they can be saved. You're sure? Kes asked, looking at the snarling, mindless creatures the rogues had become. I'm sure because someone believed I could be saved when I was at my worst. Nyx looked at Darien. We extend that same belief to everyone. That's what makes us different. The chambers beneath the veil had been converted into healing spaces, rooms where corrupted vampires could be slowly purged of the darknesses. Influence. It was experimental, uncertain, but early results were promising. 3 vampires they treated in the first month were now lucid, horrified by what they'd done under corruption's influence, and working to make amends. Later, after the wounded were tended and the captured rogues secured, Darien and Nyx returned to their private chambers. They were exhausted, bloodied, pushed to their limits. Every day is like this, Nyx said, collapsing onto their bed. Crisis after crisis. Threat after threat. When does it get easier? Maybe never. Darien sat beside her, took her hand, but we're making a difference. Those refugees have sanctuary. Those rogues have a chance at healing. The veil is growing stronger. At what cost to us? She looked at him and he saw the fear beneath her strength. What if we burn out? What if the seal demands more than we can give? What if? He kissed her, stopping the spiral of anxiety. When he pulled back, he cooped her face. Then we'll face it together, like we've faced everything else. That's the deal, remember? Forever. Bound to each other, facing whatever comes. Forever, she repeated, and something in her eased. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do more than I thought I could love anyone. I love you too, even when you're catastrophizing. She laughed, swatted him. I'm being realistic. You're being scared, which is allowed. This is terrifying. We're essentially making up how to be guardians as we go. He laid down beside her, pulled her close, but look at what we've built in 3 months. Imagine what we can do in 3 years, 3 decades, 3 centuries. She nestled against him, her head on his chest, and through the bond, he felt her fear slowly transforming into something steadier. Hope, purpose, love. Tell me a story, she said quietly, about the future, about us in 100 years. So he did. He painted pictures with words. The veil grown into a true city. Thousands living in harmony. Their sanctuary known across the world as a place of healing and balance. The portal, sealed so completely that the darkness was only a distant memory. And the 2 of them still together, still bound, still choosing each other every single day. That sounds impossible, she murmured, already drifting towards sleep. So did surviving that cell. So did the bond. So did becoming guardians. He kissed the top of her head. We specialize in impossible. She smiled against his chest. Then let's make it real. They fell asleep tangled together. 2 beings who were no longer quite human or vampire, but something new. Something that had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, together over a loan. Outside their window, the crimson veil settled into peaceful night. Guards patrolled. Refugees slept safely. Healing chambers hummed with purification magic. And deep beneath the city, the portal remained, sealed, held by the bond of two souls who refused to let darkness win. 1 year later, Darien stood in what they'd started calling the Hall of Bonds, a space in the Vale where humans and vampires formalized partnerships similar to his and Nyx's. Not all were romantic. Some were familial, others based on deep friendship or shared purpose. But all were bonds that crossed species, lines that said, "We choose to be stronger together." Today, 3 pairs were being celebrated. An elderly human scholar bonded with a vampire historian, combining their knowledge to preserve both species' histories. Twin human warriors bonded with vampire twins, creating a fighting unit of devastating coordination. And a young human healer bonded with a vampire physician, their combined abilities already saving lives that neither could save alone. Nyx conducted the ceremony with grace Darien still marveled at. She'd grown into her role as guardian, as leader, as symbol of what was possible when old hatreds were set aside. "You honor the veil," she told the bonding pairs. "You honor both our species, and you proved that what Darien and I started was not an accident or an anomaly, but a path forward. May your bonds be strong. May they bring you joy. May they make both our peoples better." The gathered crowd, hundreds now, the Vale's population growing weekly, cheered. Darien felt through his bond. With Nyx her deep satisfaction, her sense of purpose fulfilled. After the ceremony, they walked the city walls together, their ritual for staying connected despite increasingly busy days. "The Southern Court wants to send students," Nyx said. "Young vampires to learn our methods. They're calling it cultural exchange, but really they want to understand how we've created stability. Do we accept? I think we have to. If we want the Vale to truly change vampire society, we need to teach the next generation." She paused, looking out over the city. Ravik suggested starting a formal academy, training grounds, not just for combat but for coexistence. Diplomacy, healing. Guardian Academy. Darien mused. "Has a ring to it. You're mocking me." "I'm really not. I think it's brilliant." He took her hand. "You've built something amazing here, Nyx. In just a year, you've transformed this place from a tomb to a thriving symbol of hope." "We've built it," she corrected. "Every decision, every risk, every success, it's been us together." Movement below caught their attention. In the main square, a mixed group of children, human and young vampire, were playing an invented game that seemed to involve lots of running and laughing. Their parents watched from the sidelines, tentative friendships forming. "That's why we do this," Nyx said softly. "So they grow up knowing each other as people, not enemies. So the next generation doesn't have to unlearn the hatred we were taught." "Huh. Do you feel really?" Darien turned to face her. "A year ago we underwent an impossible ritual. We've been transformed into something neither of our species fully understands. We're bound to this place, to each other, to a responsibility that'll last centuries. Any regrets?" She was quiet for a moment, genuinely considering. Then she smiled. That full radiant smile that still made his heart skip. "Not one single regret. This year has been the hardest of my life. I've been challenged, frightened, pushed beyond every limit I thought I had." She cooped his face. "And it's also been the best year of my life because I've spent it free. Building instead of running, loving instead of hiding, living with purpose instead of just surviving. Even the parts where we nearly died fighting corrupted vampires, or when that human militia tried to assassinate us, or when the portal fluctuated and we spent 3 days channeling power to stabilize it. Even those parts because we faced them. Together because we won. She kissed him softly. Because at the end of every terrible day, I get to fall asleep next to you and wake up knowing we'll face the next challenge side by side. Forever, Darien said. Forever, she agreed. A bell rang, the signal for evening council. They'd instituted a governance system that included both vampires and humans, with Nyx and Darien serving as final arbiters when consensus couldn't be reached. It was imperfect, often frustrating, but it worked. Duty calls. Nyx sighed. Duty can wait 5 more minutes. Darien pulled her closer, looking out over the Vale as the sun set and lights began to glow in windows throughout the city. Let's just be us for a few more minutes. Not guardians, not leaders, just Darien and Nyx. 2. People who somehow found each other in the worst possible circumstances and decided to build something beautiful. She leaned against him, content. I like being just us. Me too. They stood, together as twilight deepened, bound by magic and choice and love. Below them, the Crimson Veil thrived, a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needed it. And deep beneath the city the portal remained sealed, held by the strength of 2 souls who'd chosen each other over destiny, fear, and impossibility. 5 years later, the Guardian Academies. First class graduated to thunderous applause. 50 students, 25 human, 25 vampire, who'd spent 3 years learning not just combat and diplomacy, but empathy and understanding. They would disperse across the territories, carrying the Veil's message. Coexistence is possible. Peace is worth fighting for. Darien watched from the platform beside Nyx, their bond humming with shared pride. They'd aged perhaps a year in the 5 since the ritual, the bond slowing there, aging to a crawl. They had centuries ahead of them. Ravik approached after the ceremony. He transformed from hunter to educator, teaching the next generation to protect, rather than persecute. The Northern Territories want to establish their own Veil, a sister sanctuary. Then we help them, Nyx said immediately. Send advisors. Share our methods. The more safe spaces exist, the better. There are rumors, Kess added, joining them from the Far East. Reports of other portals, other seals that are weakening. Darien and Nyx exchanged glances. Through their bond, understanding passed. Their work here was successful. But it wasn't finished. It might never be finished. Then we investigate, Darien said. If there are other portals, they'll need other guardians. We can't seal them all ourselves, but we can teach others what we've learned. The Veil will be in good hands, Ravik assured them. The council is strong. The people are committed. If you need to travel, we do, Nyx confirmed. She looked at Darien. Together, always together. They left the Crimson Veil a week later, traveling east with a small group of volunteers. The Veil had been their salvation, their home, their purpose. But the world was larger than one city, and darkness had many doors. As they walked, Nyx took Darien's hand. Through their bond he felt her contentment despite the uncertainty ahead. They were doing what they were meant to do. Together, do you ever think about that cell? She asked suddenly. Where we met. How impossible this would have seemed then. Every day, Darien admitted. I think about how I was ready to die. How you were lost in darkness. How neither of us believed we had futures. And now look at us guardians. Legends according to some building a better world one sanctuary at a time. She laughed. If you told me this would happen when those guards threw you into my cell, you'd have thought I was insane. Completely. She stopped walking, turned to face him. Behind them, the Veil rose against the horizon. Proof of what was possible. Ahead, unknown territories waited. Proof that the work continued. Thank you for choosing me in that cell. Foreseeing. Past the monster to the person beneath. For giving me a future when I thought I only had death waiting. Thank you for not killing me in 3 days. She laughed. The bar was admittedly low, and yet we cleared it spectacularly. He pulled her close. I love you. Have I mentioned that today? Twice. But I never get tired of hearing it. Good. Because you're going to hear it approximately 10,000 more times over the next few centuries. Only 10,000. You're slacking. They kissed as the sun set behind the crimson veil. Two beings, who were neither human nor vampire, but something new. Something that had proven love was stronger than fear, choice more powerful than destiny, and together more resilient than any force that opposed them. The darkness still lurked in forgotten corners. Evil still existed in the world, but so did hope. So did courage. So did two guardians who refused to let darkness win. And that was enough. 5 years later, the Guardian Academy's first class graduated too. Thunderous applause. 50 students, 25 human, 25 vampire, who'd spent 3 years learning not just combat and diplomacy, but empathy and understanding. They would disperse across the territories, carrying the Veil's message: coexistence is possible. Peace is worth fighting for. Darien watched from the platform beside Nyx, their bond humming with shared pride. They'd aged perhaps a year in the 5 since the ritual, the bond slowing their aging to a crawl. They had centuries ahead of them. Ravik approached after the ceremony. He transformed from hunter to educator, teaching the next generation to protect rather than persecute. The Northern Territories want to establish their own veil, a sister sanctuary. Then we help them, Nyx said immediately. Send advisors. Share our methods. The more safe spaces exist, the better. There are rumors, Kess added, joining them from the Far East. Reports of other portals. Other seals that are weakening. Darien and Nyx exchanged glances. Through their bond, understanding passed. Their work here was successful. But it wasn't finished. It might never be finished. Then we investigate, Darien said. If there are other portals, they'll need other guardians. We can't seal them all ourselves, but we can teach others what we've learned. The veil will be in good hands, Ravik assured them. The council is strong. The people are committed. If you need to travel, we do, Nyx confirmed. She looked at Darien. Together, always together. They left the Crimson Veil a week later, traveling east with a small group of volunteers. The Veil had been their salvation, their home, their purpose. But the world was larger than one city, and darkness had many doors. As they walked, Nyx took Darien's hand. Through their bond he felt her contentment despite the uncertainty ahead. They were doing what they were meant to do together. Do you ever think about that cell? She asked suddenly where we met. How impossible this would have seemed then. Every day, Darien admitted. I think about how I was ready to die. How you were lost in darkness. How neither of us believed we had futures. And now look at us guardians. Legends according to some building a better world one sanctuary at a time. She laughed. If you told me this would happen when those guards threw you into my cell, you'd have thought I was insane. Completely. She stopped walking, turned to face him. Behind them, the veil rose against the horizon. Proof of what was possible ahead. Unknown territories waited. Proof that the work continued. Thank you for choosing me in that cell. For seeing past the monster to the person beneath. For giving me a future when I thought I only had death waiting. Thank you for not killing me in 3 days." She laughed. The bar was admittedly low, and yet we cleared it spectacularly. He pulled her close. "I love you. Have I mentioned that today? Twice. But I never get tired of hearing it." "Good. Because you're going to hear it approximately 10,000 more times over the next few centuries." "Only 10,000. You're slacking." They kissed as the sun set behind the crimson veil. Two beings who were neither human nor vampire, but something new. Something that had proven love was stronger than fear, choice more powerful than destiny, and together more resilient than any force that opposed them. The darkness still lurked in forgotten corners. Evil still existed in the world, but so did hope. So did courage. So did two guardians who refused to let darkness win. And that was enough.